Chapter 686. Mother Sure looked at Jean Hauser with a probing gaze. Facing her gaze, Jean Hauser was much calmer. "Hello, Auntie." "Yes, I'm Jean Hauser. One just woke up and is inside." Jean Hauser took a step back as he spoke and gestured for Mother Sure to enter the door. Mother Sure entered the house, but she wasn't in a hurry to see her daughter. Instead, he sized up Jean Hauser. Jean Hauser, she didn't expect Jean Hauser to be such a handsome young man. Look at his clothes and the way he talks. There was also the feeling that came from his body. Such a man was actually with her daughter? However, Mother Sure's hesitation didn't last long. She was still carrying bags of things in her hands. Jean Hauser took the initiative to take them and place them on the coffee table beside him. "Auntie, do you want to see Wan? Okay." Mother Sure decided to see her daughter first. Jean Hauser followed behind Mother Sure into the room. As soon as he entered the room, he remembered. There was a pile of broken pieces on the ground, as well as the porridge on the ground. That messy scene did not look good at all. Jean Hauser was a little awkward. Mother Sure looked at him and then at Shi Mengwan. Her eyes were instantly on high alert. "Mom?" When Shi Mengwan saw Mother Sure appear, she held her forehead with her hand and felt that it was really over. "Why are you here?" She hadn't fully recovered from her illness, so her voice sounded weak. Mother Sure was very worried, but looking at the mess on the ground, she went down first. "Lie down first. We'll talk later." Mother Sure stepped forward. She was used to cleaning up, even if he wasn't familiar with this place. In just a few moments, the floor was cleaned up. He was afraid that Shi Mengwan would step on the debris when she got down, so he carefully scanned the room and cleaned it completely. Then, he sat in front of Shi Mengwan's bed again. After a while, Jean Hauser scooped another bowl of porridge and placed it on the bedside table. "Auntie, you came at the right time. Wan hasn't had breakfast yet." Mother Sure was very old. When she saw the mess on the ground, she knew that something had happened between the two of them. She glanced at Jean Hauser with an unfathomable expression. "Mr. Jean, right? Could you please go out first? I want to talk to Wan for a bit." "Of course." Jean Hauser nodded and left after glancing at Shi Mengwan. Only Shi Mengwan and her daughter were left in the room. Mother Sure picked up the bowl of porridge and looked at her daughter with a little heartache. "Why are you sick? Why didn't you tell me? Didn't you know that I would be worried? How can people not get sick from eating grains? It's not a big deal." Shi Mengwan reached out to take the bowl, but Mother Sure didn't let her and directly fed her a spoonful of porridge. Mother Sure focused on feeding the porridge, and Shi Mengwan focused on eating the porridge. After a while, she saw the bottom. Shi Mengwan looked like she didn't want to drink anymore, so Mother Sure put down the bowl. "Tell me, what's going on?" Mother Sure pouted and looked outside the door. "Nothing, that's all." Shi Mengwan didn't want to say more. She didn't expect Jean Hauser to pick up her call, nor did she expect Jean Hauser to be bumped into by Mother Sure. Either way, it was not a situation she wanted to see. She didn't know how to answer her mother's question. "Your boyfriend? Why haven't I heard you mention this before? How long have you known each other? Where is he from? What does he do?" He even went on a blind date with Xiaoqi during the New Year. At that time, she didn't know this person yet. It seemed like she met him later on. "Mom, are you checking my household registration? Shouldn't I check my daughter's boyfriend?" If Mother Sure didn't see that Shi Mengwan was still sick, she would have poked her in the head to see what she was thinking. "Are you going to say it yourself? Or do you want me to go out and ask him?" "Mom." Shi Mengwan was a little annoyed. She was thinking about breaking up with Jean Hauser. She had already made up her mind. Who knew that her illness would give Jean Hauser a chance? It wasn't that she wasn't angry, but she couldn't reveal anything in front of her mother. "Mom, his name is Jean Hauser. I haven't known him for long. He runs a company." "Haven't known him for long." Mother Sure wasn't an idiot. "You haven't known him for long, and you've already let him enter the house? Are you living together?" "Mom." Shi Mengwan's face was red. She was too embarrassed to answer. "Can you stop asking?" "How can I not ask? Tell me, this child." Mother Sure was also anxious. Ever since Shi Mengwan was young, other than the time she ran away from home, she had never worried about her. She also knew that Shi Mengwan had always been proud. The last time she said that in front of Grandma Sure, she probably had to do it. But looking at Jean Hauser, how could he look like a man who was willing to marry into the family and let his child take someone else's surname? Sure, Mingwan probably couldn't control such a man. Mingwan, what's going on with you? Mother Sure was referring to the mess when she came in. Why did these two people look a little off? Mom, can you leave it alone? Sure, Mingwan was really annoyed. She wanted to get rid of Jean Hausa, but she didn't know that not only did she not get rid of him, but she also got herself deeper and deeper into it. It wasn't easy for her to make up her mind, but who knew that such a thing would happen again? You child. Sure, Mingwan had been stubborn since she was young. Mother Sure wanted to say a few words to her, but she knew that this child couldn't be too serious. If you don't want to say it, then you can rest first. What do you want to eat for lunch? Mom will make it for you. Anything. Sure, Mingwan really didn't mean to go against Mother Sure, but she was also in a mess right now. She really didn't know what to say. Mother Sure looked at her and sighed silently. She took the bowl and went out. Jean Hausa was in the living room. He seemed to be on the phone. Hearing Mother Sure come out, he hung up the phone. Mother Sure put the bowl in the kitchen and looked at the kitchen. There was no smell of smoke. It seemed that they didn't cook much. Jean Hausa stood at the kitchen door. Auntie, have you eaten? I've eaten. Mother Sure looked in the direction of the living room. Jean Hausa understood, and the two of them walked outside together. Mother Sure sat down on the sofa and gestured for Jean Hausa to sit down as well. Compared to usual, Jean Hausa was sitting very upright. His hands were on his knees, and he looked like he was sitting upright. Mother Sure's brows twitched slightly, and she sized up Jean Hausa again. Her eyes were long and deep. Although she tried her best to restrain herself when she looked at people, she was still very imposing. Mother Sure was from a small town. The most powerful person she had seen in the past was only the county head of their county. Today, when she saw Jean Hausa, she had a feeling that the person in front of her wasn't an ordinary person. How old is Mr. Jean this year? Auntie, just call me Hausa. I'm 29 years old this year. Where does Mr. Jean work? Mother Sure didn't answer him. This form of address was still a little unfamiliar and polite. I've opened 2 small companies of my own. In addition, I also have a small business under my name. Jean Hausa spoke modestly, but Mother Sure wasn't as relaxed as he thought. Instead, her gaze became more and more wary and distant. Sure, Mingwan had been beautiful since she was young. She was afraid that the man in front of her had bad intentions. When did Mr. Jean and Wanwan meet? I've known Wanwan for a long time. Mother Sure was stunned for a moment. She recalled what Sure Mingwan had said to her before. You've known each other for a long time? But Wanwan didn't have a boyfriend during the new year. If she didn't know that Sure Mingwan didn't have a boyfriend, why would she arrange for her to go on a blind date with Xiaoqi? I met Wanwan last year, but we only got together recently. In other words, you haven't been together for long. Jean Hausa didn't avoid Mother Sure's question. Instead, he was quite calm. I haven't been together for a long time, but I feel that 2 people aren't together based on the length of time. Some people don't understand each other, even after being together for a lifetime. But some people can hit it off at first sight. It can be seen that the depth of a relationship can't be measured by the length of time they've known each other. What do you think? Mother Sure reluctantly accepted Jean Hausa's explanation, but she asked, then, according to Mr. Jean, you're sincere about Wanwan? Yes. Jean Hausa nodded. His answer was extremely firm. Mother Sure's expression was a little more relaxed than before. Her gaze fell on Jean Hausa and swept across him. Finally, as if she had made up her mind, she spoke softly. Mr. Jean, has Wanwan told you about our family situation? I wonder what you're referring to, Annie? I don't think Wanwan will tell you. Since that's the case, I'll tell you. Mother Sure's greatest regret in her life was that she didn't have a son, but after having 2 daughters, that regret wasn't a regret anymore. In her heart, nothing could compare to her 2 daughters. My husband, Wanwan's father, is the eldest in the family. There are 2 more brothers. After I married her father, I only gave birth to Wanwan and her younger sister. When I gave birth to Wanwan's younger sister, Wanwan's grandmother was very unhappy and wanted me to send Wanwan's younger sister away to give birth to another son. At that time, Wanwan was very unhappy. Because of this, she even ran away from home to protest. Jean Hausa's eyes darkened when he heard this, but it was only for a moment. Soon, he sat there expressionlessly and listened to Mother Sure. After she ran away from home, her father and I slowly got over it. What son? How can he be more important than a daughter? When Mother Sure said this, she thought of her daughter's wandering time outside for more than a year, and her expression didn't look good. After Wan Wan returned home, her father and I also gave up on the idea of having another child. It's just that we don't want to have another child, but Wan Wan's grandmother doesn't think so. She briefly recounted what Shi Ming Wan said when Grandmother Shi came looking for her that day. Mother Shi had been paying attention to Zhang Hao's expression. That's how it is. Zhang Hao was expressionless, and Mother Shi couldn't figure out what he was thinking. Wan Wan agreed. If she find a partner and asks the male lead to marry into her family, the child she gives birth to will have Wan Wan's surname. Mother Shi paused for a moment and realized that Zhang Hao was still expressionless. She could only continue. I know that a normal man wouldn't agree to such a condition. I don't mean anything else by saying so much. I just want to say that if you agree, then you can continue dating Wan Wan. If you don't agree, I think you should just forget about your relationship. After all, if time passes and your relationship deepens, everyone will be in pain. Mother Shi had never taken what Shi Mengwan said that day seriously. She had never thought of letting Shi Mengwan marry into her family. She had even thought that if Shi Mengwan met a man she really liked one day, and the other party really wouldn't agree to her conditions, for the sake of Shi Mengwan's happiness, she was willing to take a step back and adopt her brother-in-law's child. She was very open-minded. She had no objections to what kind of man Shi Mengwan found and what kind of man she was with. It was just that she saw Zhang Hao today. Such a man was definitely not her ideal son-in-law. The most important thing was the mess she saw just now. Her daughter had never been an unreasonable person. She wouldn't make a fuss until the porridge was knocked over. No matter who started it first, it meant that the couple was in conflict now. Her daughter was her flesh and blood, so she would always protect her. That was why she wanted to say what Shi Mengwan said. It was for no other reason than to make things difficult for Zhang Hao. Zhang Hao hadn't said anything, so Mother Shi couldn't tell what she felt. There was disappointment, and there was also bitterness. Her daughter was good in every way, but Zhang Hao wasn't willing to answer her, which made her feel a little dissatisfied. At this point, if Mr. Zhang can't make a decision, why don't we just let it go? After all, if they're not suitable, forcing them to be together will only increase each other's pain. Moreover, with Mr. Zhang's talent, I believe that Mr. Zhang won't have to worry about not being able to find a partner. Andy, Zhang Hao finally spoke. I know everything you said. I think there's no problem. It was Mother Shi's turn to be stunned. What do you mean? I agree to marry into your family. I don't mind giving birth to a child with the surname Shi. Mother Shi's mouth was wide open. She suddenly realized that she had lost her composure. She cleared her throat. Mr. Zhang is a man. He doesn't want to make random promises to make an old woman like me happy. Auntie, I'm not making random promises. I'm serious. Zhang Hao's voice wasn't loud, but his sincere words made Mother Shi speechless. Can Mr. Zhang take responsibility for what he said? Of course. A man's words can't be taken back. Since I dare to promise you, I can naturally take responsibility for what I said. Mother Shi, who didn't expect such an answer, finally looked at Zhang Hao differently. She thought for a moment and couldn't help but speak. When I came in just now, I saw the porridge spilled. Can I ask what happened? Zhang Hao didn't seem surprised by Mother Shi's question. It's my fault. Wan Wan has been with me for a long time, but I haven't brought her to see my family. Wan Wan might be unhappy because of this. Mother Shi didn't completely believe Zhang Hao's words. Then why didn't you bring Wan Wan to see your family? Zhang Hao was silent. He crossed his hands on his knees and lowered his eyes, as if he found it difficult to speak. My mother has already passed away. After my mother passed away, my father married someone else. Then, my relationship with my father wasn't good. So, Zhang Hao didn't finish his sentence, but Mother Shi seemed to understand what he meant. I see. Yes. Zhang Hao looked up at Mother Shi. In fact, I know about Wan Wan's knot, but I'm not close to my father. So, I don't think my father has to participate in my life's important matters. Mother Shi nodded as if she could understand Zhang Hao's thoughts. That's true, but he's your family after all. It's better to talk about some things properly. Yes, I will. Jean Hauser nodded as if he didn't object to Mother Sure's words. At this moment, Mother Sure felt some sympathy for Jean Hauser. His biological mother died early and his father married someone else. As the saying goes, if you have a stepmother, you will have a stepfather. Since Jean Hauser's father married someone else, he couldn't be very good to Jean Hauser. This way, it was normal for Jean Hauser to have a knot in his heart and not want to bring Shi Mingwan home. She knew her daughter's temper a little. She was afraid that Shi Mingwan would feel that Jean Hauser didn't value her. In this way, it wasn't entirely Jean Hauser's responsibility. Hauser, I'm not afraid to tell you the truth. Wanwan has had a bad temper since she was young. Both her father and I spoil her too much, and we spoil her rotten. Since you can even accept the condition of marrying into the family, it means that you're sincere to Wanwan. I believe that since Wanwan let you marry into the family, it means that she also has feelings for you. Since that's the case, you two should get along well. You should understand each other. In just a short while, Mother Sure had even changed the way she addressed him. It was obvious that she had already confirmed Jean Hauser's feelings. Jean Hauser's expression didn't change, but he felt much more relaxed. Annie, don't worry. I know. Mother Sure nodded. Although having such a son-in-law wasn't part of her plan, it really gave birth to a mother-in-law looking at her son-in-law. The more she looked at him, the more interesting it became. Looking at the time, she stood up. I brought some local specialties from home. Is Hauser still going out today? No need. Jean Hauser wouldn't say that he still had a bunch of company matters to deal with. Mother Sure was satisfied. She nodded. Okay, I'll go buy some groceries. Let's have lunch together. This was considered as acknowledging Jean Hauser's identity. How can I let Auntie buy groceries? Let's go out for lunch. Wanwan likes to eat the food I cook. Besides, Wanwan hasn't recovered from her illness, so it's not suitable for her to go out for those oily foods. Then I'll go buy groceries? Jean Hauser stood up as well. Mother Sure looked at his eager expression and couldn't help but laugh. No need, you accompany Wanwan. I've been here before, so I know where the market is. As she spoke, she pouted and looked in the direction of the room. Wanwan seems to still be angry. Go coax her. She has a bad temper. Since you've decided to be with her, be more tolerant. I will. Don't worry, Annie. Chapter 687. Jean Hauser wanted to ask Tang Hua to arrange for someone to send her off, but he was afraid that he would scare Mother Sure, so he could only give up after thinking about it. He turned around and went into the room. Shi Mingwan's fever had subsided. It was just that she was still listless and couldn't muster up any energy. After Mother Sure went out, she fell asleep in a daze for a while. Just now, Jean Hauser was chatting with Mother Sure outside. Because the door was closed and the sound wasn't loud, he didn't wake her up. Jean Hauser entered the door and placed his hand on her forehead. After making sure that her fever had subsided and that there was no big problem, he sat down by the bed. He just looked at Shi Mingwan's sleeping face. When she was asleep, she wasn't as beautiful as when she was awake. Because of her illness, her face was pale, making her look delicate and pitiful. His hand unconsciously caressed her cheek as he thought about Mother Sure's words just now. Looking for a son-in-law? This seemed like something Shi Mingwan would say and do. He was a little lost in thought, but his hand didn't move away from Shi Mingwan's face. Shi Mingwan didn't sleep well at first, but now that she felt someone touching her, she naturally thought it was Mother Sure. She wasn't fully awake yet. She rubbed her face against the person's hand and didn't open her eyes. Mom, I'm so thirsty. Pour me a glass of water. Jean Hauser looked at the dependence she inadvertently revealed. It was something she didn't have when facing him. He retracted his hand and looked at her deeply. He got up and went out to pour water. He poured water in. One hand was placed behind her, as if to help her up. Shi Mingwan yawned and still had her eyes closed. She drank half of the water from the hand that the other party handed over, but she suddenly realized that something was wrong. Her mother didn't have the strength to support her body with one hand and feed her water with the other. She suddenly opened her eyes and looked at the person. When she realized that it was Jean Hauser, her eyes widened. Why is it you? Where's my mom? Didn't he leave? When she went out, she was still thinking that her mother would see her half-hearted attitude. She would definitely chase him away. She didn't expect him to not leave. Your mom went to buy groceries. She said that you like her cooking. Jean Hausa put the cup aside and sat down by the bed. Shi Mingwan sat up straight, avoided his hand, and moved herself a little to the side. Why are you still here? Don't you have to work? You're sick. Her lifeless appearance yesterday scared him, so he asked Tang Hua to bring some urgent business matters here. Who am I sick because of? Who did this to me? Shi Mingwan's words were quite impolite. Jean Hausa revealed a rare trace of embarrassment. The reason why she was sick was indeed because of him. If he hadn't messed around in the bathroom, she wouldn't have gotten sick. Shi Mingwan looked at the expression on his face and thought that he was feeling guilty. She sneered and said, I'm almost recovered. My mother is also here. There's nothing else for you to do. You can go. Jean Hausa didn't leave as she wished. Auntie went to buy groceries and asked me to stay and take care of you. Thank you, but it's okay. Shi Mingwan looked reluctant. With you here, I won't be able to recover. If you really wanted to be well, hurry up and leave. Auntie asked me to have lunch together. Shi Mingwan couldn't help but look at him. Jean Hausa, what did you say to my mother? Tell me. Mother Shi actually asked him to stay for lunch? This revealed too much information. Nothing. I just told your mother that I agreed to your conditions. Her conditions? What conditions? Shi Mingwan never thought that Jean Hausa would agree to marry into her family, nor did she think that he would be willing to let his child have the surname Shi. Therefore, when she suddenly heard this sentence, she was confused. Your mother told me that if I want to be with you, I want to marry into your family, and I want the child to have the surname Shi. Shi Mingwan's mouth was wide open. She looked at Jean Hausa, and for a moment, she thought that there was something wrong with her ears. Jean Hausa, do you know what you're saying? I know. You want to marry into my family? Are you sure? Yes. It was just a surname, so Jean Hausa didn't care. Moreover, that matter was too far away, so he didn't have the mood to think about it now. Shi Mingwan suddenly reached out and pulled the front of Jean Hausa's shirt over. She didn't have much strength. If it weren't for Jean Hausa's cooperation, she probably wouldn't have been able to pull him in front of her. She just stared at him, her gaze weak but sharp. Jean Hausa, do you know what you're saying? Jean Hausa went to pull her hand. You haven't recovered yet. Don't worry about these things for now. Rest well. Jean Hausa, answer my question. Do you know what you're saying? You want to marry into my family? Yes. Does this mean that you want to marry me? Her eyes were filled with suspicion and mockery. She just looked at him like that, not believing what he said at all. Yes. Two consecutive affirmative answers didn't soften Shi Mingwan's attitude at all. She looked at Jean Hausa, and the expression on her face became sharper. What about Chun Feifei? If you want to marry me, what will she do? Jean Hausa's expression didn't change. He seemed to dislike hearing Chun Feifei's name very much. Our matter has nothing to do with her, and you don't need to think about her. Don't need to think about Chun Feifei. And then, the entire Lin City knew that Jean Hausa and Chun Feifei were engaged. Now that Jean Hausa said that he wanted to marry her, wasn't he making her a third party who intervened in other people's relationships? Jean Hausa, you don't understand at all. He might have some feelings for her and liked her, but he wouldn't understand her perspective, her thoughts, and her worries. I've said it before. You don't need to think about those things. Jean Hausa, you're so selfish. Her words were sarcastic, but Jean Hausa wasn't moved at all. He looked at the sharp side of her. It was rare for her to be like this. He didn't know if it was because Mother Shi came. The Shi Mingwan in front of him was much more confident. This was how people were. With someone to rely on, they would always be different. He reached out to pull Shi Mingwan's hand over and held it in his palm. He looked at her with a deep gaze. Wan, you can also be more selfish. He didn't like her to think about Chun Feifei, and he didn't like her to worry too much. It was enough for him to worry about those things. She didn't need to think about them at all. Just like Grandma Shi's words and actions, she could actually completely ignore them. She would only tire herself out by doing this. Shi Mingwan pulled her hand back, and her face was cold. Jean Hausa, I'm not you. There are some things that I will never be able to do, and I will never be as carefree as you. Wan, get out. Shi Mingwan refused to communicate with him anymore. She didn't want to look at him either. Wan, Jean Hausa wanted to say something, but Mother Sure had already returned. When she left, she took the key from the porch, entered the door, and put the dishes in the kitchen. She planned to go to the room to see how Shermangwan was doing, but she realized that the atmosphere between the two of them didn't seem to be very good. Wan. Mother Sure looked at Shermangwan and then at Jean Hausa. Her gaze wandered between the two of them. Seeing her mother return, Shermangwan didn't show any dissatisfaction on her face. Mom. She was about to get up, but Mother Sure quickly stopped her. You should continue to rest. I'll go cook. It's all your favorite food. You guys wait for a while. You can eat later. It was almost noon. Mother Sure was afraid that her daughter would starve, so she gave a few instructions and went into the kitchen. As soon as Mother Sure left, Shermangwan wanted to chase Jean Hausa away. However, her phone rang at this moment. This time, she didn't give Jean Hausa a chance and went to pick up the phone herself. Jean Hausa glanced at her, then got up and went outside. Mother Sure had just finished washing the rice when Jean Hausa came in. He rolled up the sleeves of his shirt to his elbows. Auntie, let me help you. No need. Mother Sure looked at Jean Hausa and knew that he rarely entered the kitchen. I'm used to cooking. I don't need your help. You just need to accompany Wan. Jean Hausa stood still. She's on the phone. You didn't cook her well, did you? Mother Sure took out the vegetables from the bag. Looking at Jean Hausa's expression, she knew that the two of them definitely didn't come to an agreement just now. Hausa, haven't you told Wan about your family situation? Jean Hausa was stunned for a moment. Mother Sure knew from his expression. You should have told Wan. Wan is a tough talker but soft-hearted child. If you told her about your family situation, she definitely wouldn't have messed with you. Mother Sure didn't know the specific situation, but she could understand. There are also such families in their town. The father brought a stepmother into the family. The stepmother didn't treat the child of the ex-wife well. When the child grew up, he wouldn't even recognize the father, let alone recognize the mother. This was all human nature. It was understandable that she couldn't understand it at the moment. However, Shermangwan was a little stubborn. If he didn't explain it to her properly, she probably wouldn't understand. Jean Hausa didn't respond, and Mother Sure didn't want his help. However, she asked him some questions. Other than your father, do you have any other relatives in your family? I don't have any relatives. Jean Hausa's expression was indifferent. I don't have much contact with them. Mother Sure didn't ask anymore. She could understand. If even her father didn't treat her well, she probably wouldn't have the energy to interact with other people. At this moment, Mother Sure's motherly love flared up. She looked at Jean Hausa more and more affectionate. If you don't have any contact with them, then so be it. Pick a time another day and come home with Wan. We have many relatives at home. If you really get together with Wan in the future, you don't have to be so polite. We'll be your elders. Jean Hausa pursed his lips slightly, and a rare look of emotion flashed across his deep eyes. Okay, although Wan's grandmother is a little unreliable, she's actually not a bad person. Although Wan's two uncles and aunts have some ulterior motives, they're also good people. You'll know in the future. Grandma Sure had always been the one talking about the adoption. Actually, her two brothers-in-law didn't have any thoughts. After all, they all knew how good Father Sure was to Shermangwan and her sister. Okay, all right, this dish can be eaten after it's served. Go and call Wan to eat. Should we bring it in for her to eat? No need. Although she's sick, don't spoil her too much. How could she be so delicate? Let her get up and move around. She'll recover faster. Mother Sure had never been a person who doted on her children. When Jean Hausa entered the room, Shermangwan had just ended the call with Su Qing-sang. After Su Qing-sang returned to Lin City, she had started working again. However, this time, she brought her good news. She was pregnant. This was really good news for Shermangwan. She had already agreed to be the godmother of the child in Su Qing-sang's stomach. When she heard that Su Qing-sang was pregnant, she was extremely happy. The two of them had been married for more than a year, and now they had a child. They were even pregnant with twins. She was really happy for Su Qing-sang from the bottom of her heart. She had never given birth, but Su Qing-sang was an obstetrician and gynecologist. She didn't need her to teach her anything. However, it didn't affect the two women's excited discussion about the child, especially when Su Qing-sang talked about how the child came about. It was very strange. Hua Jinyao didn't seem to want children. This pregnancy was an accident. Su Qing-sang originally thought that Hua Jinyao would want her to abort the child. However, she didn't expect Hua Jinyao to be very happy, even to the point of being silly. Through the phone, Shi Mengwan could feel the happiness that Su Qing-sang revealed when she said that. She was very envious. After hanging up the phone, she couldn't help but think of Zhan Haoze. If she was pregnant, would dear brother be happy? Thinking of the situation between her and Zhan Haoze, she smiled bitterly. It wasn't the same thing at all. If she had a child, it would be really unfortunate. Just as she was thinking this, she looked up and saw Zhan Haoze enter the door. She especially didn't like him now. She turned her face away, not wanting to see him at all. It's time to eat. It wasn't that Zhan Haoze didn't see the expression on Shi Mengwan's face. His lips were pursed into a straight line, and he looked a little gloomy. Shi Mengwan didn't give him a good look. She got out of bed, but as soon as her feet touched the ground, her body became a little weak. She rarely got sick, but she didn't know that this illness was because she had slept for too long, and her legs were a little weak. Zhan Haoze quickly stepped forward and hugged her. The moment his hands hugged her, Shi Mengwan instinctively wanted to struggle. Unfortunately, even if she was healthy, she wasn't a match for him, not to mention that she hadn't recovered from her illness yet. Zhan Haoze looked at her still, pale little face, but he didn't intend to put her down. He just carried her and walked out. When Shi Mengwan realized what he was going to do, she struggled with all her might. She didn't want her mother to see her like this. "Don't move," Zhan Haoze whispered in her ear. "You don't want to fall either, do you?" Shi Mengwan couldn't help but glare at him, but Zhan Haoze didn't seem to see her ugly expression. He wasn't afraid that Mother Shi was outside, so he directly carried her to the dining table outside. Mother Shi happened to come out with the soup and was about to put it on the dining table. She suddenly saw her daughter being carried out by Zhan Haoze, and the smile on her face became a little playful. Especially when she saw Shi Mengwan staring at Zhan Haoze with deep love, she even said, "You're too much. Don't you have legs? Come down and eat. Put me down." Shi Mengwan glared at Zhan Haoze again, and Zhan Haoze obediently placed her on the dining chair. Mother Shi now felt that Zhan Haoze wasn't bad, with his height and physical strength. What was the saying on the internet now? Yes, boyfriend strength. Not bad, not bad. The smile on her face became even brighter. Shi Mengwan knew what Mother Shi was thinking when she saw her expression, and she was angry again. She couldn't help but glare at Zhan Haoze again. Mother Shi looked at Zhan Haoze, and her gaze was different now. "Haoze, sit down and eat too." "Thank you, Auntie." Zhan Haoze sat down next to Shi Mengwan. Shi Mengwan glanced at him, then got up and moved the chair to the side. Seeing this, Zhan Haoze moved the chair in her direction. Shi Mengwan gritted her teeth and was about to move the chair again. "Wan, Mother Shi couldn't take it anymore. You're not honest even when you're eating. Do you want me to help you move the chair outside the door?" Shi Mengwan gritted her teeth and glanced at Mother Shi. "Mom, what do you know?" She had a lot to say, but Mother Shi didn't give her a chance. "What's wrong with Haoze?" "I think Haoze is very good. You really have to change your temper." Shi Mengwan's eyes widened. "What's wrong with my temper?" "Stubborn." Mother Shi unceremoniously criticized her daughter, but when she faced Zhan Haoze, her face was smiling like a flower. "Haoze, one has been spoiled rotten by her father and me. You have to be more tolerant." As she spoke, she scooped a bowl of soup and placed it in front of Zhan Haoze. Shi Mengwan saw this and was very angry. She couldn't help but reach out and bring the bowl of soup over. "You child." Mother Shi looked at Shi Mengwan and felt that her daughter was a little too much. "It's okay, Auntie." Zhan Haoze was quite magnanimous. The more he was like this, the more Mother Shi felt that her daughter was immature. She scooped another bowl of soup and placed it in front of Zhan Haoze. Shi Mengwan resisted the urge to knock the soup away. "Mom, doesn't he have his own hands? Let him scoop it himself." "You child, didn't I help you scoop soup at home? You don't have hands either." "I'm your daughter. He's my son-in-law." The bowl in Sherman-Wan's hand almost fell down. She looked at Mother Sure and felt a headache coming on. Mom, what nonsense are you talking about? How am I talking nonsense? Mother Sure glanced at John Hauser. Hauser has already agreed to marry into the family. How am I talking nonsense? He's lying to you. Sherman-Wan was furious. She couldn't help but glare at John Hauser fiercely. It was all this guy's fault for spouting nonsense in front of her mother. Mom, don't believe him. I don't believe him. Believe you? I think Hauser is pretty good. I think you really have to change your temper. Otherwise, I won't be able to stand you in the future, let alone Hauser. Mom, am I still your daughter? Why do you always side with outsiders? If he becomes my son-in-law, then he won't be an outsider. Mother Sure's expression was matter of fact. Sherman-Wan was furious. She watched as Jean Hauser picked up the bowl in his hand and calmly drank the soup. She couldn't help but feel angry. Without thinking, she snatched the bowl from his hand and placed it on the table. She glared at Jean Hauser fiercely, not caring about Mother Sure's presence at all. Jean Hauser, leave. Go find your fiancé. Don't lie to my mom here. Even if she would shed all pretenses and make Mother Sure unhappy, she couldn't take it anymore. She had no scruples. As soon as she said this, Mother Sure's expression changed. Her gaze was sharp for a moment, and then she looked at Jean Hauser inquiringly. Chapter 688. Fiancé? What fiancé? The expression on Mother Sure's face changed completely. She looked at Sherman-Wan and finally realized that her daughter did have a temper, but she was definitely not someone who would cause trouble for no reason. Hauser? What fiancé? Jean Hauser looked at Sherman-Wan as if he didn't expect her to talk about such a topic in front of Mother Sure. The corners of Sherman-Wan's lips curled up, and her eyes were filled with disdain. She looked at Jean Hauser fixedly. She wanted to know how he would explain it in front of her mother. Mr. Jean? Mother Sure saw that Jean Hauser hadn't spoken, so the way she addressed him changed. Jean Hauser glanced at Sherman-Wan and turned to face Mother Sure with a calm expression. I do have a fiancée, but I don't have any feelings for her, and I promised Wan that I would resolve this matter. So you really have a fiancé? Mother Sure only paid attention to the first sentence. Auntie, I said I would resolve it. Mr. Jean, please. Mother Sure's face darkened. She looked at Jean Hauser impolitely and pointed in the direction of the door. Mr. Jean, our small family can't afford to be associated with Mr. Jean. Auntie, I promised Wan that I would definitely resolve this matter. Jean Hauser was rarely patient, but Mother Sure didn't want to listen. Then we'll talk about it after you resolve it. The atmosphere was a little awkward and stiff. Jean Hauser's expression was a little awkward. He had never been good at explaining, but because the other party was Sherman-Wan's mother and an elder, his attitude was quite polite. Auntie, I just need some time to resolve it. This isn't a big deal. Sherman-Wan looked at him and didn't speak. Not a big deal. Why would she want a man who couldn't be with her openly? Mother Sure looked at him impolitely and didn't accept this explanation. Not a big deal. I wonder what Mr. Jean's definition of a big deal is. You think having a fiancé isn't a big deal, but if our Wan has a fiancé at home, I wonder if Mr. Jean also thinks it's not a big deal. She countered Jean Hauser, and Jean Hauser's expression became more and more uncomfortable. Auntie, please. Mother Sure's expression was already very ugly. It was true that she liked Jean Hauser before, but that was based on the fact that Jean Hauser had a clean background and no messy relationships around him. Jean Hauser had a fiancé. In Mother Sure's eyes, no matter how good he wasn't a good man. He couldn't be entrusted with her life. The atmosphere in the dining room was very awkward. Mother Sure and Sherman-Wan didn't look too good. Sherman-Wan sat there, and the corners of her lips curled into a mocking smile. She didn't go to see Jean Hauser. With Mother Sure's help, she had nothing to do. She even leisurely picked up the soup in front of her and took a sip. Freshly made Sinsian soup, light and delicious, tastes really good. Mom, this soup is really delicious. She looked at Mother Sure with a faint smile on her face. That silent intimacy caused Jean Hauser's eyes to darken. If you like it, drink more. Mother Sure glanced at Jean Hauser as she spoke. Mr. Jean, if there's nothing else, You can leave first. Wan and I still want to eat. It's inconvenient for you to be here. Jean Hausa took a deep look at Shi Mengwan and finally stood up. He stood in front of the dining table. His tall figure made him look imposing as soon as he stood up. Mother Shi didn't give in, and Shi Mengwan still drank the soup leisurely. After drinking this soup, she felt much better. Her heartless appearance made Jean Hausa's expression turn a little ugly. He pulled out the chair and took a step back. Auntie, please give me some time. I will solve my problem. Mother Shi was unmoved. In her heart, nothing could compare to her son's happiness. Jean Hausa looked at Shi Mengwan again. She had already finished the soup in the bowl and handed the bowl to Mother Shi. The corners of her lips curled up into an extremely bright smile. Mom, give me another bowl of soup. Don't drink the soup. Drink it later. Eat first. As Mother Shi spoke, she scooped a bowl of rice for Shi Mengwan and placed it in her hand. Jean Hausa saw that she wasn't looking at him at all, and his expression was very ugly. Auntie, Wan, I'll be leaving first. No one paid attention to him. Ever since Jean Hausa became famous as a young man, he had never encountered such a thing. However, Mother Shi and Shi Mengwan acted as if they didn't see him and continued to eat. Jean Hausa turned around and was about to leave. Wait. When Jean Hausa reached the door, Shi Mengwan suddenly called out to him. This time, both Mother Shi and Jean Hausa looked at her. They didn't understand what she was doing, especially Mother Shi. Her face was full of worry. Could this child be regretting it? Jean Hausa, leave the key to my house. After Shi Mengwan said this, she lowered her head and went to eat. Mother Shi seemed to have suddenly thought of this problem. She stared at Jean Hausa and waited for him to hand over the key. Jean Hausa stood at the door. This was the first time in his life that he had experienced such a predicament. He took a deep look at Shi Mengwan, then took out the key to Shi Mengwan's house and placed it at the entrance. He opened the door and walked straight out. The door opened and closed. Shi Mengwan's heart had been hanging in her throat, but now she finally relaxed. Mother Shi sat down and looked at Shi Mengwan with a hint of heartache in her eyes. Wan, Mommy. Shi Mengwan knew what Mother Shi wanted to say without guessing, but she didn't want to hear it now. Wan, how could Mother Shi eat? She only felt that her daughter's life was bitter. Did you know that Jean Hausa had a fiancé? Shi Mengwan lowered her head and didn't answer Mother Shi's question. However, this attitude was undoubtedly a tacit agreement. Daughter, why are you so stupid? You, Mom. Shi Mengwan's eyes were a little sore, and her heart was also uncomfortable. She forced herself to ignore it. It's all in the past. He's gone now, isn't he? This person had left, but the impact was still there. When Mother Shi thought of the impact Shi Mengwan had caused because of the other party, she felt even more uncomfortable. This Jean Hausa looks like a decent person. Why would he do something like having an affair? Shi Mengwan didn't answer her, and Mother Shi didn't need her to answer either. She said to herself, that's true. You can know a person's face, but not his heart. There are some people in this world who really can't see through it. She looked at Shi Mengwan worriedly and sighed in her heart. Wan, why do you think your life is so bitter? Mom. Shi Mengwan stopped eating for a moment. She looked at Mother Shi. Can you stop talking? It's all in the past. Yes, it's all in the past. Mother Shi stopped talking. In the future, stay away from that John guy. I know. It's not that I'm stopping you, but no matter how good this man is, he's still someone else's. Mom, I told you I know. In the future, I'll find a better one. We'll talk about it later. How could she be in the mood to look for another one now? That Xiao Qi. Mom, can you not mention him? If Shi Mengwan was interested in Xiao Qi, the two of them would have been together a long time ago. She just didn't mean that. Mother Shi let out a long sigh. Seeing her like this, Shi Mengwan put down the bowl in her hand, picked up the bowl, and placed a bowl of soup in front of her. All right, let's eat. Seeing that Mother Shi still didn't seem to be happy, she said nonchalantly, Mom, don't worry. Your daughter is loved by everyone. Flowers bloom when they see flowers. Someone will definitely want her. Seeing her like this, Mother Shi could only let it go no matter how worried she was. You. Shi Mengwan lowered her eyes and focused on eating. She didn't respond to Mother Shi's words. Tang Hua looked at Zhang Haoze. Even if he didn't say anything, he could tell that Zhang Haoze was in a very bad mood. Boss, how's the cooperation case with Tianji? It's almost done. We're just waiting to sign the contract. Confirm this matter again later. Sign the contract in these 2 days. Yes. In silence, Zhang Haoze looked out of the window. No one knew what he was thinking. Tang Hua felt a chill on the back of his neck. Boss's mood really wasn't right? It couldn't be because of that person, right? Is there any movement over there? The old man's health seems to be getting worse. I heard that he called a lawyer again 2 days ago. Call a lawyer? Zhang Haoze narrowed his eyes as if he had thought of something. He sneered. Make the arrangements. I'll make a trip to Qing City. Okay, I'll make the arrangements now. Tang Hua just opened the office door when he saw Chun Feifei standing at the door. His expression was a little strange. Miss Chun. This shout was especially loud, causing Chun Feifei to glare at him. What are you shouting for? You're so surprised. I don't know why Brother Hao left someone like you by his side. Tang Hua rubbed his nose and turned to look at Zhang Haoze. Zhang Haoze gave him a look, and he quickly left. After he left, Zhang Haoze picked up the document beside him and started reading. Chun Feifei bit her lip and walked in quickly. Brother Hao, what have you been busy with these 2 days? You haven't been in the company for 3 days. I have something to do. What's more important than the company's matters? Chun Feifei was wearing a decent professional suit and holding a document in her hand. Zhang Haoze looked up at her. What's the matter? Of course there's something. Chun Feifei's attention was successfully diverted by Zhang Haoze. She waved the folder in her hand. Brother Hao, I also want to contribute to the company. This is a proposal that I spent a few days making. Take a look. Zhang Haoze wasn't in a hurry to take the document. He looked at Chun Feifei with a solemn and somewhat gloomy expression. Feifei, yes, you don't have to work so hard. Zhang Haoze was serious. You can stay at home and enjoy your days as the eldest daughter of the Chun family. Chun Feifei looked at Zhang Haoze blankly, as if she didn't quite understand what he meant. But I want to enter the company. I want to help you. There's no need. Zhang Haoze said directly. Feifei, don't waste all your time on me. You should go live your own life. Chapter 689. It means that you should live your own life. Your own life. Zhang Haoze explained again in a rare good temper. Chun Feifei understood, but she would rather not understand. Brother Hao, what do you mean? What do you mean by my own life? This is the kind of life I want. No. Zhang Haoze looked at her calmly. I mean, you can contact more members of the opposite sex, fall in love, and enjoy the process of falling in love. Chun Feifei looked at him in a daze. It took her some time to understand what Zhang Haoze meant. Her eyes were filled with shock. After she reacted, her emotions began to lose control. Brother Hao, what do you mean? I'm your fiancé. You want me to find another man? Feifei, you know that I only have sibling feelings for you. Brother Hao. Chun Feifei interrupted him. Don't say any more. I don't want to hear it. Feifei, Brother Hao, I don't want to fall in love with another man. I like you. I love you. I don't want anyone else. I just want you. But I don't love you. In the past, Zhang Haoze was worried about Chun Feifei's body, so he had never said it to her so straightforwardly. He was only hinting. Now, he didn't want to continue. Chun Feifei's face turned pale. She looked at Zhang Haoze and didn't accept what he said at all. Brother Hao, I know you don't love me, but now you don't even give me a chance to love you? Is that so? Zhang Haoze's cold face softened because of Chun Feifei's expression. Feifei, you're still young. You don't quite understand what love is. Why don't I understand? Chun Feifei shook her head and refused to accept what Zhang Haoze said. I only know that I like you. I've always liked you. I didn't know anything in the past. I stayed at home every day waiting for you to come back and accompany me. But now I've changed. Look, I like you. I go to work every day. I work very hard. My dad praised me last time. Brother Hao, I can do anything, but I can't live without you. Don't do this to me. Her heart palpitations were acting up again. She covered her heart with one hand and looked at Zhang Haoze with a pained expression. Brother Hao, I really can do anything, as long as you don't abandon me. Fei Fei. After all, she was the girl he had watched grow up. Jean House's expression was cold, but not as cold as before. You don't have to be like this. I really don't love you. Because you don't love me, you've deprived me of my right to love you, right? There were tears in Chun Fei Fei's eyes. Because of her illness, her face was very pale, and she looked quite weak and uncomfortable. However, Jean Hauser was not moved at all. Fei Fei, you need to live your own life. She would not have in her life. These days, Chun Fei Fei had been thinking about doing her job well and making Jean Hauser look at her in a new light. But she didn't expect Jean Hauser to be so heartless. Brother Hao. Chun Fei Fei stepped forward, wanting to grab Jean Hauser's hand. Jean Hauser avoided it, and her face became paler. Brother Hao, do you hate me so much now? What did I do wrong? Jean Hauser didn't answer her question. Fei Fei, I probably have to go out tomorrow. You can also take this opportunity to think about what I said. He had said everything he could. As for how to get over it, it was her own business. Just as he was about to call Tang Huolai to send her back, Chun Fei Fei's body went limp and she actually fainted in his arms. Fei Fei. When she fell to the ground, Jean Hauser had no choice but to reach out to support her. He carried her in his arms and hurried out of the room. An hour later, Chen Yongchong, who had rushed over after hearing the news, looked at his unconscious daughter on the hospital bed. His gaze at Jean Hauser was unusually gloomy. Hauser, is this how you treat Fei Fei? Jean Hauser was silent. His appearance made Chen Yongchong even angrier. Tell me, how have I treated you all these years? Huh? Not to mention that I've been wholeheartedly nurturing you all these years. Just take it as me saving you back then and preventing you from dying on the streets. You should think about thanking me, right? I don't want you to keep talking about our family's kindness to you every day. But no matter what, you know how good Fei Fei has been to you all these years. If you treat her like this now, will you be able to face Fei Fei? Jean Hauser pursed his lips into a straight line. No matter what Chen Yongchong said, he just didn't say anything. Chen Yongchong was furious. He pointed at him and said, You. Okay, so I've raised an ingrate all these years? Huh? Jean Hauser, you're not being kind like this. Jean Hauser stood there and let Chen Yongchong's hand almost poke the tip of his nose. From time to time, doctors and nurses passed by in the corridor. Chen Yongchong retracted his hand hatefully. Hauser, you can't be heartless. Uncle. Jean Hauser finally spoke. You should have seen everything I've done for the Chen family over the years. The Chen family has done me a favor. I know that I've been repaying the favor all these years. But there are some things that you can't force. I only have sibling love for Fei Fei, not love between a man and a woman. If Fei Fei really is with me, she won't be happy. You're saying this now? Then why did you agree to be engaged to Fei Fei back then? Jean Hauser's expression didn't change, but there was a flash of mockery in his eyes. Do you still need me to tell you what happened during that engagement? Chen Yongchong couldn't keep his face straight, so he could only bring up the favor again. Anyway, the Chen family has done you a favor, and Fei Fei has also done you a favor. You can't do something like burning the bridge after crossing the river. As he spoke, he grabbed Jean Hauser's arm. Don't forget, if Fei Fei hadn't insisted on saving you back then, you would have been buried on some mountain by now. I won't ask for anything else from you. Anyway, you have to be responsible for Fei Fei. Jean Hauser looked at Chen Yongchong's hand, and his eyes were slightly cold. Under that gaze, even Chen Yongchong, who had lived more than 20 years longer than him, had no choice but to retract his hand. The doctor happened to come out at this moment to tell them that Chen Fei Fei had woken up. The two of them entered the ward together. Chen Fei Fei's face was pale, and her entire body was like a destroyed little white flower. When she saw Jean Hauser, her eyes turned red again, and she looked like she wanted to say something, but she hesitated. Chen Yongchang's heart ached for his daughter. He glared at Jean Hauser hatefully and took a few steps forward. Fei Fei, how are you? Dad, I'm fine. Chen Fei Fei's voice was weak, which made Chen Yongchang's heart ache. She just stared at Jean Hauser. Brother Hao, can we say a few words? Jean Hauser didn't say anything, but his expression became more serious than before. Chun Feifei bit her lip and pleaded, "Brother Hao, you don't even want to say a few words to me now?" Chen Yongchang glared at Zhan Haoze again. "Feifei, Dad will wait for you for a while. I still have something to talk to you about." He went out, and only Chen Feifei and Zhan Haoze were left in the ward. "Brother Hao, Feifei." Zhan Haoze looked at her. "I'm going to Qing City tomorrow. I won't be back for a while." "Brother Hao." Chen Feifei was anxious. She wanted to get out of bed, but Zhan Haoze stopped her. "During this period of time, you can think about what you want. What I want is you. You've always been the only one. You're still too young." Zhan Haoze shook his head. "Your dad is very worried about you. Take good care of yourself, and don't do anything that will make him more worried." After saying this, Zhan Haoze didn't look at Chen Feifei anymore. He turned around and left the ward. Chen Feifei wanted to get out of bed and chase after him, but Chen Yongchang had already come in and stopped her. Zhan Haoze didn't see any of this, but at this time, even if he saw it, he wouldn't care. When he left the hospital, Tang Hua had been guarding him. When he saw him come out, he immediately went forward to open the car door for him. After he got into the car, Tang Hua signaled the driver to drive. He looked at him worriedly. "Boss, how's Chen Feifei?" Zhan Haoze didn't say anything. Tang Hua raised his eyebrows, and there was a hint of gossip on his face. "Chen Yongchang, that old fox, won't use kindness to ask you to repay it again, right?" Seeing that Zhan Haoze didn't say anything, Tang Hua snorted. "That old fox, does he really think that you don't know what he did later?" Zhan Haoze didn't respond. Seeing that he wasn't angry, Tang Hua couldn't help but say a few more words. "Speaking of which, the economic crisis of the Chun family almost caused the entire Chen family to go bankrupt. If it weren't for your help, how could the Chen family still have any glory now? Not to mention their current status in Lin City. If it weren't for you supporting the entire Chun family that year, I'm afraid that the father and daughter would have lived a hard life long ago. How could they still have the face to talk to you about kindness? This old fox is really thick-skinned." Feeling Zhan Haoze's gaze on him, Tang Hua didn't back down. "That's true. That little kindness has long been repaid." "That is you." Zhan Haoze's gaze became sharper and sharper, and Tang Hua didn't say anything else. "Boss, don't glare at me. I'm just feeling wrong for you." Zhan Haoze continued to be silent. It didn't matter if he felt wronged or not. It was a fact that Chun Feifei and Chun Yongchang had saved him. This was undeniable. It was understandable that Chun Yongchang wanted to repay them. However, it was up to him whether he agreed to repay them in his own way. Because of Mother Shi's arrival, Shi Mingwan felt much better. Other than the mention of Zhan Haoze during breakfast, the two of them didn't talk about him anymore. Shi Mingwan recovered very quickly. She felt almost better the next day. As soon as she recovered, she wanted to go to work, but Mother Shi wouldn't let her. "The studio is your own anyway. Your body is also your own. You can work at any time, but if your body collapses, you won't be able to." Because Mother Shi was around, Shi Mingwan couldn't go to work, so she could only agree to rest at home for another day. Mother Shi was very happy to receive her daughter's affirmation. She picked up her bag and went out to buy groceries. Just as Mother Shi left, the doorbell rang. Shi Mingwan happened to see Mother Shi's phone on the coffee table. She thought it was Mother Shi who had returned to take her phone, so she went to open the door without thinking too much. When the door opened and she saw Zhan Haoze standing outside, Shi Mingwan closed the door without thinking. Zhan Haoze stretched out his long legs and directly blocked her from closing the door. The door couldn't be closed, so he took this opportunity to flash in. "Zhan Haoze?" In the next second, she hugged Zhan Haoze. Shi Mingwan instinctively wanted to struggle. "Don't move." Zhan Haoze pressed his chin against her neck. "Let me hug you." Shi Mingwan's body was very stiff. She was hugged tightly by Zhan Haoze. She couldn't even move. However, she had never seen Zhan Haoze like this before. She was a little dazed. She subconsciously moved her body. Zhan Haoze let go of her at this moment. He took a few steps back, and his gaze fell on Shi Mingwan's face. He looked at her greedily. "Have you recovered from your illness?" "Yes." Shi Mingwan's expression didn't change. Zhan Haoze nodded. "I need to go out. This time it might take a long time." It has nothing to do with me, Meng answered without thinking. After saying that, she saw Jean House's gloomy face. It was too late to change her mind. Moreover, she didn't think she was wrong. Jean House, you're not anyone to me. You really don't need to report your whereabouts to me. She said that, but Jean House looked at her deeply. I've already made it clear to Chen Fei. Really? Did it have anything to do with her? He had made it clear to Chen Fei, but what was the result? Did they break off the engagement? If not, what was the use of him saying all this today? Jean House's brows twitched slightly. He looked at Meng with a rare gentleness. Wan, are you willing to give me some time? He couldn't tell her how much time he needed. After all, there was still a lot of trouble in Qing City. It wasn't something that could be resolved in a day or two. He should have endured it and waited for the trouble to be resolved before looking for her. But he couldn't bear to. I'm not willing. Mengwan's words were even more heartless than before. Jean House's eyes darkened. Wan, you should go. Otherwise, my mother will be back later. Jean House stood still, but Mengwan went forward and opened the door. He looked like he couldn't wait for her to leave. Jean House's expression was very ugly. He looked at Mengwan with a very complicated gaze. Mengwan acted as if she didn't see it. Instead, she opened the door a little more. Wan. Mengwan turned her face away. She didn't look at him at all, nor did she listen to his explanation. Jean House was helpless. He looked at the time and was about to board the plane. He couldn't help but look at Mengwan again, but she still didn't look at him. He could only turn around and leave. When he left, his shoulders drooped, and his entire body revealed a great sense of powerlessness. Mengwan's action of closing the door stiffened for a moment. After Jean House walked out, he stopped again. Mengwan didn't want to continue watching, so she closed the door with a bang. After the door closed, she leaned against the door. She told herself that all of this was Jean House acting. It was all fake. She couldn't be soft-hearted, and she couldn't be soft-hearted. That was it. However, she couldn't forget Jean House's disappointed back view before he left, and the words he kept telling her to give him time. The plane slowly landed at Qing City Airport. Jean House came out of the airport and got into the car waiting outside. His expression wasn't good. In fact, he had been gloomy ever since he came out of Mengwan's house. Tang Hua didn't even dare to speak. Now that he had arrived at Qing City, he had no choice but to speak. Boss, there's news from my hometown. What news? The old man has brought Jean into the ancestral house these few days. Johnny? He hadn't heard of this person before. Yes. As Tang Hua spoke, he took out a document and placed it in Jean House's hand. This has all of Jean Yi's information. Take a look first. Jean House took the document and flipped through it. At this moment, the car drove towards Jean House's residence in Qing City, Cherry Blossom Manor. The Jean family was the #1 family in Qing City. The head of the Jean family, Jean Kuan, had always been the pillar of the entire Jean family. In the past few years, Jean Kuan's health had been getting worse and worse. He, who was gradually getting old, began to delegate some of the power in his hands to his son, Jean Lai. Jean Lai wasn't Jean Kuan's only son. The Jean family had power and influence. When Jean Kuan was young, he was quite unrestrained when it came to women. Other than Jean Lai, he also had several illegitimate daughters and illegitimate children. But those children weren't Jean Lai. Some of them didn't even have the right to enter the Jean family. This wasn't because Jean Lai was outstanding, but because Jean Lai was born from Jean Kuan's only wife. He was the legitimate son, and also the eldest son. He was also the product of the combination of power. Jean Kuan made his fortune by taking the side path. After his business grew bigger and bigger, he knew that a tall tree would attract the wind. In order to protect the Jean family's secret business, he married the daughter of a high-ranking official in the province where Qing City was located at that time. In the first few years of a strong marriage, he treated his wife with some respect. Although he played outside, he didn't have any illegitimate children. But later, Jean Lai's biological mother gave birth to Jean Lai and had a son, so he didn't care anymore. He could play however he wanted outside. More importantly, Jean Lai's mother died when she gave birth to him. Jean Lai was born without a mother. Jean Kuan was young at that time, and Jean Lai's grandfather knew that such a daughter couldn't keep her virginity for her daughter. Therefore, after communicating with each other, they made two rules. First, Jean Lai couldn't call another woman mother, which meant that Jean Kuan could forget about marrying again in this lifetime. Secondly, everything in the Jean family in the future must belong to Jean Lai. There were only these two, and the rest was up to Jean Kuan to do. Jean Kuan had nothing to disagree with. Even if he didn't want to agree in that kind of situation at that time, the Jean family's business really needed to be taken care of by the external family. Therefore, Jean Kuan was quite concerned about his son, Jean Lai. On one hand, he took good care of him. Second, he was also groomed as a successor. However, as Jean Lai grew up, he began to have his own ideas. Jean Kuan realized that this son of his was different from him. Jean Kuan liked women and power. He seemed affectionate, but he was actually heartless. What about Jean Lai? He had never liked women since he was young. Until he reached puberty, he would avoid women as much as possible. For a long time, Jean Kuan thought that his son was sick. When Jean Lai was 18 years old, he even specially prepared two women and sent them to Jean Lai's bed. Unfortunately, Jean Lai didn't touch those two women at all. Instead, he seemed to be frightened and didn't go home for a few days. Jean Kuan was angry. Later, he asked a psychiatrist and repeatedly confirmed that Jean Lai only didn't like the woman he chose, and not because Jean Lai didn't like women. That was why he stopped all actions of sending women to Jean Lai. However, it was precisely this Jean Lai who didn't like women. However, not long after he graduated from university, he took a fancy to a woman from a commoner background. It didn't matter if he took a fancy to her. He just wanted to play with her. Jean Kuan would never control his son in these matters. But look at his son. Not only did he insist on being with this commoner woman, he also decided to marry her. This was something that Jean Kuan absolutely couldn't tolerate. He chose Jean Lai as his successor and groomed Jean Lai according to the method of a successor. He had to let him follow the path that he had arranged for him. He tried his best to stop Jean Lai from being with that commoner woman, and then gave that commoner woman a sum of money. He wanted that woman to leave his son. However, he didn't expect that commoner woman to be so scheming. After taking his money, she showed the check to Jean Lai. When Jean Lai saw the check, he had a big fight with him. Once again, he showed his determination to be with that woman. Of course, this wasn't something that Jean Kuan could tolerate. He didn't raise Jean Lai to let him disobey him. He asked people to keep an eye on Jean Lai and not let him see that woman. He asked people to send that woman away, far away. But he didn't expect that his good son. In order to be with that woman, he took advantage of the fact that he was busy with his family's business to look for that woman. When he was young, Jean Lai wasn't fully fledged, so of course he didn't have that much ability. But even if he couldn't get married, he still had an external family. Jean Lai's grandfather came out to help Jean Lai at this moment. Not only did he successfully find that woman, but the two of them even eloped. This was simply a provocation to Jean Kuan's authority. How could he tolerate such a thing happening? He used the name of the Jean family to set up a bounty. Both the black and white forces received the bounty. However, with Jean Lai's external family opposing him, he couldn't find Jean Lai and that woman for a long time. It wasn't until later that someone finally told him the news of Jean Lai and that woman. Jean Kuan hid from the world. The spies of the external family brought people and personally went to look for them. However, he found out that not only did Jean Lai and that woman not break up, they even had a child. Seeing that Jean Lai even had a child, this didn't make Jean Kuan calm down. It only made him even angrier. Especially when Jean Kuan saw his son, the outstanding son that he had single-handedly raised. The son who wanted to let the other party inherit the entire Jean family business. Just like an ordinary man, he accompanied a woman to go shopping and buy groceries. He looked at his son and actually smiled like an idiot. Holding a child in his arms, he smiled like a fool. He even saw his son changing the diapers of child, when his son had already become a mediocre, tacky man. Jean Kuan couldn't control his emotions at all. To hell with any agreement. Such a son. He didn't want it. But after calming down, he began to vent his anger. The person who made his son become like this was that woman. If it weren't for that woman, his son wouldn't have become such a mediocre man. Chapter 690. The atmosphere in the carriage was very quiet. It had been a long time since Jean Hauser finished reading the information. There was no reaction. Tang Hua couldn't help but be a little worried. Boss! Jean Hauser withdrew his thoughts from the past. Looking at the information in his hand, his face was a little gloomy. His gaze fell on Zhang Yi's photo, and he sneered. If Zhani comes back, won't Zhang Li and Zhang Yang be unable to sit still? His lips curled into a mocking smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Tang Hua nodded. Zhang Li and Zhang Yang were transferred abroad by the old master. They won't be able to come back for the time being. At this point, Tang Hua's expression suddenly changed. I received news that Zhang Yi seems to have contacted the people in the sky. I think he's just trying to get Tianji's order and use it as a stepping stone to his family. Zhang Hauser's gaze became more and more sinister. His gaze was gloomy, as if he had thought of something. Zhani, don't think about the list in the sky. However, I can give him another big gift. Tang Hua looked at Zhang Hauser. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the street view of Qing City outside the window. No matter what, Zhang Li and Zhang Yang are part of the Zhang family. Since the old man wants Zhang Yi to go home, then they have to come back and send a congratulatory gift, right? Tang Hua understood and nodded. That's right. This gift can't be light. That's right. Since Zhang Li and Zhang Yang have sent a great gift, I, as their elder brother, naturally have to send a great gift as well. Boss. Tang Hua immediately reacted. Sixth brother is waiting. It's fine. Tell old 6 and old 7 to prepare. When does Zhang Yi come home? That's when we make our move. Don't worry. Zhang Kun lay on the hospital bed and listened to Uncle Chi's reply. He didn't look too well. Ever since he was struck by the wind, his body had not been in good shape. Even if he went out, he had to use a wheelchair. He had to gasp for air just to say a single sentence. More importantly, he couldn't move half of his body. For Zhang Kun, who had once been all-powerful, this was truly more uncomfortable than death. Zhang, he is back. He's here. Uncle Chi was the butler of the Zhang Manor. He was also one of Zhang Kuen's most trusted subordinates. He had followed Zhang Kun for many years. Let him come up. Zhani came up. He looked somewhat similar to Zhang Kun. It could even be said that he was the most similar to Zhang Kun in the third generation. However, this resemblance was only in appearance. The thing you said last time, how is it? Because of the wind, Zhang Kuen's voice was very slow. His voice was hoarse, and it sounded unpleasant no matter how one listened to it. Grandpa, I'm sorry. I didn't manage to get Skyline's deal. At this point, Zhang Yi was still a little unwilling. He knew that this was an opportunity for him. Zhang Kuen's face suddenly turned red, and he started coughing violently. Uncle Chi was behind him, quickly supporting his body and patting him on the back. However, it was useless. Zhang Kun was still coughing violently. He glared at Zhang. He almost wanted to stare a hole in his body. What did you say? His voice was hoarse, and his eyes were bloodshot. Zhang, he had never been close to this grandfather. Seeing Zhang Kun like this, he was a little scared. I said, the person who obtained the order from Tianji is Zhang Hauser. Zhang Kun coughed again. This time, he coughed even more violently than before. The order from Tianji wasn't much. Although the profits it brought were considerable, it wasn't necessary for the Zhang family. However, the person who obtained the order from Tianji shouldn't be Zhang Hauser. Anyone could do it, but it couldn't be Zhang Hauser that be Astra-starred. Grandfather, Zhani still wanted to say something more. Zhang Kun grabbed the water cup by the bedside and threw it at Zhani. Although he was old, the temper of his youth was still there. This throw almost hit Zhang Yi's head. If he hadn't dodged quickly, his face would have been disfigured. Grandfather, since you're fine, I'll go out first. After saying that, Zhang Yi turned around and left. His footsteps seemed to be chased by a ghost. When Zhang Kun saw this, he coughed violently again. No matter how Uncle Chi comforted him, it was useless. It wasn't easy for him to calm down, but Zhang Kun's expression was still terrifyingly gloomy. Be Astra-starred. He's indeed a B asterisk starred. I should have killed him back then. I should have killed him. It was obvious that it took a lot of effort to speak, but he still said 2 sentences in a row. It could be seen how angry Jean Cohen was. After scolding, he looked at Uncle Chi, give the order. I don't want to see the B asterisk starred live in this world. No matter who you find, no matter what method you use, I don't want to see him again. Uncle Chi had followed John Cohen for the longest time. When he heard his decision, he couldn't help but frown. Master Cohen, Jean House's ability is not bad. Wouldn't it be a pity to get rid of him just like that? Others didn't know what Jean House had done all these years, but Uncle Chi knew it very well. If such a capable person could really take over the Jean family, the Jean family would definitely be able to continue their glory. Don't even think about it. Jean Cohen didn't consider this suggestion at all. Even if my Jean family's things are thrown away, donated, and squandered, I definitely won't give them to that be asterisk starred. Uncle Chi was speechless, but he could understand Jean Cohen's concerns. Jean Cohen didn't care if he understood or not. What he needed to do now was to get rid of Jean House, who was an eyesore. Do as I say. Jean House didn't know that someone wanted his life. Even if he knew, he wouldn't care. He had been very busy in Qing City for the past 2 days, very busy. On one hand, he had personally negotiated the cooperation with Tianji. With this business, the company would definitely rise to a higher level. On the other hand, he was also preparing a congratulatory gift. In order to build momentum for Jean Cohen actually held a banquet for Jean. Before the banquet began, Jean Cohen specially asked the doctor to come over and examine him. He was also in good spirits. Tonight was a big day, so no matter how angry he was, he wouldn't show it. The Jean family had been operating in Qing City for decades, and their relationships were very complicated. There were also many people. Since Jean Cohen wanted to support Jean, the scene naturally wouldn't be small. It could even be said to be quite a big scene. He first appeared with Jean and introduced him in front of everyone. This was his grandson. In the future, he would be in charge of some of the Jean family's business. When he said this, he didn't have to care about other people's feelings at all. Naturally, he didn't know that other than Jean Yi's father, Jean Ji, the rest of the people present didn't look too good, especially Jean Lai. His face was so gloomy that it could almost drip blood. Jean Cohen had always been used to being self-centered, not to mention the thoughts of his son and grandson. He had never cared about anyone's thoughts for so many years. However, just when he was having a good time, 2 uninvited guests came to the venue. Jean Cohen, who was originally bringing Jean around the venue to identify people, suddenly had a bad premonition when he saw the people. He instinctively looked at Uncle Chi, but Uncle Chi didn't expect such people to come on such a day. He was stunned for a moment. Soon, the 2 of them walked to Jean Cohen's wheelchair. Jean House got on the plane. The private plane was already ready and could take off at any time. He was still waiting for the final news. 5 minutes later, it was time to take off, and the news he was waiting for had also come back. Tang Hua hung up the phone and walked towards Jean House with a smile on his face. Boss, the old man is in the hospital again. Jean House wasn't surprised at all. Ever since Jean Cohen had a stroke last time, his health hadn't been as good as before. If he was provoked again tonight, it would be strange if he didn't go to the hospital. Boss, do you think the old man will die just like that? If that was really the case, it would be too easy for Jean Cohen. After so many years, who knew how many bad things he had done? Yet, there was no retribution at all. No, Jean House was extremely calm. After a short period of happiness, he was thinking about what they were going to do next. The old man won't die so easily. Even if he was struck by the wind again, or if he fell ill again and couldn't move his entire body, he wouldn't die so easily. After all, the Jean family was relying on him to support it. Jean Cohen knew very well that if he fell, the Jean family would have no leader. When the time came, the people outside would attack them together. Even if the Jean family was big, they wouldn't be able to withstand it easily. What a pity! Tang Hua punched the seat under him. Boss, you should have killed him directly. Jean House shook his head. Kill Jean Cohen? No, he didn't have that thought yet. His only thought right now was that John Cohen couldn't die so easily, because that would be too easy on him. He didn't know how much he hated John Cohen. He hated him so much that he wanted to cut him into pieces. Why? Keep an eye on him during this period of time. With such a thing happening to John Cohen, I'm afraid the Jean family won't be peaceful either. You have to pay more attention. Don't worry, I know. Tang Hua looked at Jean Hausa. But you, boss, you have to pay more attention. We've been doing so much recently. I'm afraid that the old man will attack you. No, he probably won't have time to deal with me for the time being. Jean Hausa thought of something, and the corners of his lips curled up again. He should be having a headache about the big gift I gave him now. Tang Hua smiled and was relieved. Jean Hausa didn't stay idle even when he was on the plane. He almost didn't rest on the plane. He had been dealing with business. When the plane landed, it was already nighttime in Lin City. Jean Hausa looked at the time. It was almost 10 o'clock. Tang Hua asked him where he was going. He seemed to have thought of something and answered with 4 words. After he finished speaking, he realized that he was talking about Shi Mengwan's home address. Without taking back his words, the driver drove the car to a Yuan apartment. By the time they arrived at Shi Mengwan's home, it was already past 11 o'clock. Boss. Tang Hua looked upstairs and then at Jean Hausa. You. Jean Hausa got out of the car and turned to look at Tang Hua. Help me send my luggage back to the apartment and pick me up tomorrow morning. Boss. Tang Hua had concerns, but Jean Hausa didn't. He turned around and went upstairs. Standing at Shi Mengwan's door, Jean Hausa closed his eyes. He thought for a moment and took out a bunch of keys from his pocket. If Shi Mengwan saw this, she would definitely scream and scold Jean Hausa for not keeping his word. Jean Hausa didn't have that many concerns. He opened the door with the key and found the direction of the room with familiarity. He had asked before he came. The person he had arranged here told him that Shi Mengwan had already returned to her hometown, so Shi Mengwan was the only one in the apartment now. The living room was very quiet and there was no light at all. The darkness didn't affect Jean Hausa's performance. He just took advantage of the night. He entered Shi Mengwan's room with familiarity. Chapter 691. The room was very quiet, so quiet that he could hear Shi Mengwan's steady breathing. Jean Hausa didn't move either. He just sat there and looked at Shi Mengwan's face. Time passed bit by bit. The east gradually turned white, and Shi Mengwan, who was on the bed, turned around. In this way, he was completely facing Jean Hausa. He lowered his head and planted a gentle kiss on her forehead. The kiss was very light, like a feather brushing across Shi Mengwan's forehead. She furrowed her brows in her sleep. Jean Hausa didn't smooth her eyebrows. He looked at her for a while, and after confirming that she didn't show any signs of waking up, he got up and left. When he went downstairs, Tang Hua was still waiting. Seeing Jean Hausa's expression, he sighed. Boss, let's go. Jean Hausa got into the car and looked back at the apartment. I'm afraid there's going to be a tough battle. He had made so many moves recently. The Jean family probably wouldn't let the matter rest so easily. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to see Shi Mengwan for a while. Boss. Tang Hua looked at Jean Hausa and sighed in his heart. You're too tired. Jean Hausa leaned back and closed his eyes to rest. Just when Tang Hua thought that he would not speak, he let out an extremely faint sigh. It doesn't matter. I'm used to it anyway. For so many years, he had racked his brains, not daring to relax in the slightest. Whether it was at the Chun family or back to Qingcheng, Tang Hua pursed his lips into a straight line and turned his face to signal the driver to drive. His eyes were a little red. After sorting out his emotions, Tang Hua looked at Jean Hausa again. Where are we going next? Let's go into the company and arrange everything. We'll return to Qing City tonight. Yes, Jean Hausa had a lot of things to do in the company. In the past few years, he had put in a lot of effort to expand his business. He needed to have the strength to fight against the Jean family in the shortest time possible. Although it was difficult, it was something he had no choice but to do. It took him a day to settle most of the company's affairs and arrange for the people to guard the company. He signed the 2 contracts that were originally scheduled to be signed. From now on, he would focus all his energy on Qingcheng. That was his main battlefield. Before boarding the plane, he He didn't forget to ask Tang Hua about Zhang Kuen's current situation. After our people let Zhang Li and Zhang Yang cause such a ruckus yesterday, the old man was sent to the hospital. It is said that the rescue lasted until the second half of the night. He's still in the ICU. Tang Hua's words were full of schadenfreude, but there was also some worry on his face. Boss, do you think the old man will die just like this? I won't. Zhang Hausa sneered. I told you, he still has things to worry about. He won't die just like that. Then, should we postpone the plan for now? No need. Zhang Hausa was impatient and didn't want to slow down. Let's see when the old man wakes up. I still have to give them my second big gift. Tang Hua smiled. Big gift? Wasn't this a great gift? The old man would probably faint if he accepted Zhang Hausa's gift. It wasn't that he fainted from happiness, but from anger. Zhang Kuen was in the ICU. The two brothers, Zhang Lai and Zhang Ji, stood guard outside. Zhang Lai sat on the bench and looked anxiously at the emergency room, which was lit up with lights. His wife, Bai Shu Qiao, was sitting next to him. She also looked anxious. Compared to them, although the expression on Zhang Ji's face was also very solemn, he didn't look very anxious. He glanced at his son. Zhang Yi understood and turned to walk out. Zhang Li and Zhang Yang blocked in front of him. The two of them didn't look very good at this moment. Both of them had bruised noses and swollen faces. Zhang Li's arm was still bandaged. It was obvious that his hand had been broken by someone. Zhang Yang wasn't much better. His face was also covered in injuries. Although there were no obvious fractures, and it wasn't as serious as Zhang Li's, the color of his face was really very good-looking. These two combinations made people feel strange and funny at first glance. However, no one at the scene could laugh. Johnny, where are you going? You're not trying to escape, are you? Although Zhang Li and Zhang Yang weren't the most ideal heirs in Zhang Kuen's eyes, but no matter what, they had grown up with Zhang Lai in the old mansion. These two brothers couldn't be said to be close to Zhang Kuen since they were young, but at least they could show their faces in front of Zhang Kuen more than those who couldn't show their faces outside. However, the two of them didn't expect Zhang Yi to appear out of nowhere. It was fine if Zhang Yi appeared. The two of them had suffered such a big loss at Zhang Yi's hands. Therefore, the two of them looked at Zhang Yi with resentment. Zhang Yi wasn't afraid of their provocation at all. He was quite calm. Escape? Do I need to escape? Where do I escape to? It's just that Grandpa told me to do something, although Grandpa is unconscious now. But I still have to finish what Grandpa told me to do. Otherwise, when Grandpa wakes up, he won't be happy. He was still young after all. He was suddenly brought back from the outside. Zhang Yi couldn't control the smugness on his face. Zhang Li and Zhang Yang were furious, especially Zhang Yang. Zhang Yi, you want to leave just like that? No way. If you don't make things clear today, don't even think about leaving. That's right. If you don't make things clear, don't even think about leaving. Zhang Li glared at Zhang Yi and raised his uninjured hand to point at him. You beat the two of us up like this, and you want to leave just like that? Yesterday, Zhang Li and Zhang Yang entered the venue with injuries all over their bodies. As soon as they entered the door, they rushed towards Zhang. Although the two of them were injured, they won because there were two of them. One of them punched Zhang Yi, and the other kicked him. Zhang Yi was protected by Zhang Kuen, so he wasn't injured. However, such a good day was ruined by Zhang Li and Zhang Yang. Zhang Kuen couldn't stand such a stimulation, and he didn't expect that the banquet he had meticulously arranged would have such a big mistake. In his anger, he was directly sent to the emergency room. Idiots! Zhang Yi sneered as he looked at the two people in front of him. Don't you go out with your brains? Zhang Yi, what do you mean? Zhang Yi, you bastard. Zhang Yang reached out his hand and was about to swing it at Zhang Yi's face again. Zhang Yi barely avoided it. He shook his head and looked at the two idiot brothers in front of him with some mockery. You said I beat you up? Are you saying that I did this to you? Without waiting for the two brothers to speak, Zhang Yi took a step forward. Why don't you think about it? Would I do such a stupid thing? You're basically being used by others without knowing it. If he isn't an idiot, then what is he? Yesterday was the first time Zhang Yi showed his face in front of others. It was supposed to be a great thing. But Zhang Li and Zhang Yang, who were outside, suddenly returned. It was one thing for him to come back, but he was injured all over and even attacked him the moment he arrived. That action was a slap on Jean Cohen's face. This angered Jean Cohen. He was so angry that he had to be hospitalized. At that time, Jean was busy acting as a filial son and grandson in front of the old man. He naturally didn't have the time to bicker with Jean Li and Jean Yang. However, he could be considered to have calmed down now. There was someone who wasn't on good terms with him and was using the Jean Yang brothers to take care of him. Now that he saw that the two of them still had the time to find trouble with him, Jean Yi's tone was naturally not very good. If it weren't for your stupidity, Grandpa wouldn't have been sent to the hospital. With the intelligence of the two brothers, they really wouldn't have thought that they had been instigated and used as a tool. Now, they heard Jean blame the reason why Jean Cohen was unconscious on them. Jean Li and Jean Yang's expressions changed. Say that again? They were out on a business trip, and it could be considered that they were exhausted for the Jean family. But what news did they hear? Jean Cohen actually recognized the child of another illegitimate child. He even planned to publicly introduce it into the upper class of Qing City. How could they allow such a thing to happen? Therefore, the two brothers hurriedly finished their work and returned to Qing City as soon as possible. They wanted to ask where this Jean came from. One had to know that all the children of the Jean family, without Jean Cohen's acknowledgement, even if their surname was Jean, it was useless. But when the two of them returned to Qing City, they were beaten up as soon as they got off the plane. The person who beat them up made it very clear that today was Jean Yi's good day. He told them to be a little more perceptive and not come to cause trouble. This was something that had never happened to Jean Li and Jean Yang. Not only was it a great humiliation to be beaten up, but it was also a clear announcement of their status in the Jean family in the future. How could Jean Li and Jean Yang tolerate it? That was why they hurriedly came to teach Jean a lesson. Yesterday, they were still fighting with him. Now that they were provoked by Jean Yi's words, the two of them stood forward together, intending to teach Jean a lesson. Jean wasn't afraid at all. You guys are really stupid. If you have the time to look for trouble with me here, you might as well think about how to find the culprit. Aren't you the culprit? Why are you pretending to be a good person here? Jean Li and Jean Yang were furious. The two of them took another step forward, and Jean Li's hand was almost about to poke Jean Yi's face. A stupid pig is a stupid pig. It's fine if you're impulsive, but you don't have a brain. Jean Yi's words angered the two of them. Before they could speak, Bai Shu Qiao, who had been silent all this time, couldn't take it anymore and stood up. Enough. She walked in front of Jean and glared at the person who had snatched her son's position. It's not your turn to make decisions in the Jean family yet. No matter how bad Jean Li and Jean Yang are, they were still raised by the old master. Who do you think you are? Jean Ji was indignant. The juniors were quarreling, so why did Bai Shu Qiao jump out? I say, sister-in-law, although you're the sister-in-law, you have to be reasonable. But you have to be reasonable when you speak and do things. The old master was originally angry because of them. Our Jean isn't wrong. As one of Jean Cohen's sons, Jean Ji was quite capable. Otherwise, how could the old man acknowledge his existence when he had so many illegitimate children outside? But no matter how capable he was, he couldn't withstand the old man wholeheartedly supporting Jean Lai. But he desperately suppressed his sons who were outside. Now, it wasn't easy for the old man to be willing to help the younger generation, especially since his son had actually caught the old man's eye. As a father, he naturally had to support his son at this time. They were arguing fiercely on this side, but Uncle Chi could only sigh in his heart when he saw it. How decisive and resourceful was Jean Cohen back then. But looking at the people of the Jean family now, other than Jean Lai, who could barely take on the role, none of the remaining third generation could take on a big responsibility. No, there was one. Uncle Chi thought of that person. Although Jean Cohen didn't like Jean Hausa, if Jean Hausa could be used by the Jean family could regain its glory in his hands. However, Jean Cohen's order was to take Jean Hausa's life. Uncle Chi hadn't had the time to order his subordinates to deal with Jean Hausa yesterday. He had already prepared the Jean family's kill order, but now he was a little hesitant. Perhaps there was no need to kill Jean Hausa. The old master didn't have many days left. It was better to think of a way to take Jean Hauser in for his own use. Of course, if he really wanted to achieve that goal, he would probably have to go through some trouble. Uncle Chi thought of this, looked at the people in front of him, and turned around to do what he wanted to do. He had been by Jean Couin's side for more than 30 years. His words could represent Jean Couin's intentions. This time, he would let him make his own decision. Jean Hauser didn't care about what the Jean family had done because of him. He was busy preparing the second gift. At night, the people of the Jean family were tired of arguing, so they couldn't be bothered to argue anymore. There weren't many who really cared about the old man. When it was time, everyone except Jean Lai went to rest. Jean Lai couldn't take it anymore and went to rest in the middle of the night. To be honest, there were doctors and nurses in the VIP ward. There was no need for them to guard here. But there was only one purpose for these people to guard here. They wanted Jean Couin to see them first when he woke up. They wanted to get attention and perform well. Jean Lai had been acting as a filial son for a long time. He was sleeping now, so he naturally went to rest. Other than the bodyguards, there was no one else in the ward. Just like last time, Jean Hauser easily entered the ward. But this time, the old man didn't wake up. In fact, the stimulation Jean Couin received this time wasn't as big as the last time, but it was even more serious than the last time. It really wasn't because he saw Jean Li and Jean Yang, the two idiots, attack Jean, that he flared up. It was because of this that he thought of the same problem as Uncle Chi, the problem that made him the most frustrated and conflicted. That was, the Jean family had developed for so many years. It had been a 100-year-old family since the late Qing dynasty, but when it came to him, it had actually fallen to the point where there was no successor. How could this not make Jean Couin depressed? Jean, he was helpless. He was forced to make this choice. But no matter what, he had taught Jean Li and Jean Yang for a period of time, but they were still so stupid and so disregarding the overall situation. As the head of the Jean family, he wasn't qualified. Even as a descendant of the Jean family, he wasn't qualified. After being provoked like this, Jean Couin became serious again. He had woken up in the afternoon, but when he woke up, he heard Jean Li and Jean Yang arguing outside about teaching Jean a lesson. As soon as he was provoked, he fainted again. Jean Hauser didn't have much time for Jean Couin. It was his business if he liked to sleep. His time was very precious. He took a look, picked up a glass of water from the bedside, and slowly poured it on Jean Couin's face. Jean Couin was old, and he hadn't recovered yet. Being splashed with cold water on his face, even though it wasn't cold in this season, made him uncomfortable. Who? He woke up at the first moment and immediately discovered Jean Hauser standing by his bed. Jean Couin remembered, but his body had just suffered a stroke. How could he have the strength? Jean Hauser casually put the cup in his hand aside. He looked down at Jean Couin coldly. You? Jean Couin wiped the water off his face. When he saw Jean Hauser, he was shocked. Didn't he ask Uncle Chi to deal with this person? Why was he still here? What about me? Jean Hauser sneered. I'm here because I have a gift for you. Jean Couin looked at him defensively. He didn't believe that Jean Hauser would be so kind. You get out. I don't want your gift. Don't you want to hear what I'm giving you? When Jean Hauser spoke, the smile on his face didn't reach his eyes. His entire person looked cold and gloomy. Get out. I don't want to see you. There was killing intent in Jean Couin's eyes. After today's matter, he would definitely ask Uncle Chi to kill Jean Hauser. I don't want to see you either. I've already said that I'm just here to give you a gift. Jean Hauser looked at his face and said two words very slowly. Jean Couin's expression changed. He tried to get up. Jean Hauser reached out a hand and pressed it on his chest. Jean Couin was old, so he couldn't break free at all. You be Astrostard, let go of me. He cursed, and Jean Hauser's strength increased by 30%. Jean Couin's face suddenly turned pale. He glared at Jean Hauser, almost glaring a hole in his eyes. Do you know why the celebrity house and the fragrance house were closed? Jean Hauser exerted force in his hand, looking at Jean Couin's angry and painful appearance. But he couldn't resist, he only felt happy. One was closed because it was involved in drugs. The other was closed because it was suspected of organizing to sell silver. At this point, Jean Hauser smiled. Next is the heavenly fragrance restaurant, Spring of the Four Seasons. In the future, these businesses will close down in your hands one by one. Are you happy? What Jean Hauser said was all about the Jean family's business that was making a lot of money every day. Every one of them had a chain. They operated different projects in different categories. The only thing they had in common was that these were all profitable businesses. You? Jean Cohen pointed at Jean Hauser. No one had told him about this matter yet. It must have just happened today. All right. I'm afraid that you'll be too worried and won't be able to recuperate in the hospital. He purposely snored. Since it's a seizure, it'll naturally take a little longer. It's not long to seize it for a year or so, don't you think? Be asterisk starred. You be asterisk starred. Other than this sentence, Jean Cohen didn't have any other words to curse. Jean Hauser sneered and finally let go of his hand. He took out a handkerchief from his pocket and slowly wiped his hand. In the end, he threw the handkerchief at Jean Cohen's face. Jean Cohen was so angry by his action that he coughed again. Jean Hauser moved his face closer. This is just the beginning. Don't worry. I will definitely destroy the Jean family in my hands. Jean Cohen couldn't even speak properly. He could only point at Jean Hauser and keep panting. Jean Hauser wasn't in the mood to admire his sorry state anymore. He turned around and left. He was about to go downstairs, but he accidentally saw Jean lie in the corridor outside. Seeing the person, Jean Hauser directly walked past him and was about to leave. However, Jean Lai blocked in front of him. Why are you here? As he spoke, he looked in the direction of the ward. He didn't know what Jean Hauser wanted to do. Jean Hauser ignored him and walked past him. Seeing him like this, Jean Lai couldn't help but say, Jean Hauser, no matter what, you're a descendant of the Jean family. You, Mr. Jean, be careful with your words. Jean Hauser stood still and said without turning his head, although my surname is Jean, I'm not a descendant of the Jean family. I'm you. Jean Lai didn't finish his sentence. Jean Hauser suddenly turned around. He reached out and grabbed the front of Jean Lai's shirt. Mr. Jean, he used all his strength. The sinister expression on his face made people think that he was Satan from hell. What are you to me? Say it. Why aren't you saying it? Jean Lai shrunk his neck. Facing Jean Hauser's expression, he didn't dare to answer him for a moment. If Mr. Jean wants to live longer, it's better to think clearly. Jean Hauser stood up straight as he spoke. His cold eyes didn't have a trace of warmth. After all, to me, my parents are already dead. Jean Lai's face was a little pale. Jean Hauser let go of his hand and took a step back. He clapped his hands, his gaze cold. If Mr. Jean doesn't know how to speak, I don't mind sending you to meet them in advance. What do you think? Jean Lai's aura was instantly suppressed by Jean Hauser, and he didn't dare to speak again. Jean Hauser looked at him and felt bored. He turned around and left. For the next month, Jean Hauser didn't go anywhere. He stayed in Qing City and focused on dealing with the Jean family's businesses. The Jean family had many businesses, including the entertainment industry, the real estate industry, and the electronics industry. They were all involved in traditional industries. A month wasn't a short time, but the Jean family had too many businesses. With his current ability, it was impossible to destroy the Jean family in a day. He could only destroy them one by one. Jean Hauser had bought a business in Qing City a few years ago. He bought the best location in the Cherry Blossom Villa. During this period of time, he had been living in the Cherry Blossom Villa. On one hand, he had to deal with the Jean family, and on the other hand, he had to prepare to move some of the company's main businesses to Qing City. Jean Hauser didn't expect that after more than a month of silence, someone from the Jean family would actually take the initiative to look for him. Looking at Uncle Chi in front of him, Jean Hauser sat down on the sofa expressionlessly. The Cherry Blossom Villa was decorated according to his preferences. It was simple but grand. Uncle Chi came in and took a few glances. When he saw Jean Hauser, he took 2 steps forward and stood opposite him. Hauser. Uncle Chi was older than Jean Lai. He called Jean Hauser's name to show his friendliness. Unfortunately, the person he met was Jean Hauser. What's the matter? Uncle Chi smiled bitterly in his heart. Jean Hausa had suppressed some of the Jean family's businesses, but now he was asking him what was the matter. Hausa, the Jean family is your family no matter what. What you're doing now isn't appropriate, right? Oh, what did I do? Jean Hausa raised his eyebrows, as if he didn't quite understand what Uncle Chi meant. I won't repeat what you did. From the celebrity hall until now, many of the Jean family's businesses had been involved, although it wasn't enough to shake the foundation. As a result, the entire Jean family was indeed in a state of panic. Uncle Chi originally wanted to get someone to make a move on Jean Hausa, but after these days, not only did he not make a move, but he also couldn't bear to. Chapter 692. Get the Jean family? Jean Hausa felt that this person was ridiculous. When did he ever want to get the Jean family? Whether it was money or status, he preferred to earn it with his own hands. He didn't want anything from the Jean family. In his heart, there would only be one outcome for the Jean family in the future, and that was to be destroyed by him with his own hands. He was already doing so, and it was only a matter of time before he reached the final step. Even Jean Hausa had to admit that it wasn't unreasonable for Jean Kuin to be ruthless and ruthless. Just look at the power and momentum that the Jean family had developed in his hands all these years. But so what? He was not afraid at all. Did you come here just to talk nonsense? Uncle Chi choked. When he thought of his purpose in coming here, he wanted to explode, but he had no choice but to calm himself down. The Jean family had a large business. I'm sure you've seen the abilities of the other descendants of the third generation. Since that was the case, why not take a step back? Your goal is just to get the Jean family. Now, I'll go and convince the old man to give you the Jean family, and you'll stop your actions. How about that? Uncle Chi felt that this was very good. He had followed Jean Kuin for many years and knew Jean Kuen's temper and personality very well. Now, Jean Kuin was already so sick. In the past month, if it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't see the Jean family fall in his hands, Jean Kuin would have been completely unable to hold on. Uncle Chi had been holding on to the Jean family's kill order for nearly 2 months, but he hadn't sent it out. It wasn't because he was soft-hearted or because of other reasons. It was just that after weighing the pros and cons, he realized that letting Jean Hausa take over the Jean family was the best outcome. Although he knew that this was the best outcome, all these years, he had always been by the Jean family and Jean Kuen's side. His position was the same as Jean Kuen's in some respects. To Jean Hausa, such a big surprise was a great gift. Unfortunately, he didn't know much about Jean Hausa. He thought that Jean Hausa was with Jean E and the others. However, he didn't know that in Jean Hausa's heart, nothing could compare to his determination to destroy the Jean family. Jean Hausa narrowed his eyes and looked at Uncle Chi's face. Give me the Jean family? Yes. Are you sure? Of course. Uncle Chi still had a trace of pride in his heart. Isn't this your goal? Jean Hausa pursed his lips into a straight line. He looked straight at Uncle Chi, his eyes cold. He didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes was unbearable. Uncle Chi suddenly realized that something was wrong. No matter what, he was an old man who had been by Jean Kuen's side for a long time. How could he be shocked by the gaze of a junior? But in that instant, he actually felt a chill run down his spine. Jean Hausa didn't speak. Uncle Chi swallowed his saliva and tried his best to stabilize his tone. You should know what to do for such a good thing, right? Jean Hausa, who was sitting on the sofa, finally changed his posture. He snapped his fingers. Soon, someone came in. Throw it out. These 3 simple words caused Uncle Chi's eyes to widen. He couldn't believe that the face he had been proud of in front of Jean Kuin for half his life had disappeared just like that. Jean Hausa, do you know what you're doing? Uncle Chi's expression changed the moment his arm was lifted. Before he was dragged away, Jean Hausa finally got up. He walked in front of Uncle Chi extremely slowly and looked at Uncle Chi with sinister eyes. I've always known what I'm doing. It's you guys who don't know. I don't care about the Jean family. All I want is to destroy him. Looking at Uncle Chi's shocked eyes, he curled his lips coldly. After all, someone has to be buried with them for what happened back then. Don't you think so? Uncle Chi was really shocked this time. He widened his eyes and looked at Jean Hausa. He couldn't believe that John Hauser actually knew what happened back then. What nonsense are you talking about? What happened back then? He wanted to play dumb, but John Hauser didn't have the patience to accompany him. He waved his hand and said, "Throw it out." Uncle Chi, who had been by Jean Cohen's side for half his life, was thrown out just like that. Jean Hauser sat back on the sofa, and Tang Hua entered the door at this moment. He bent down. "Boss, Jean, he asked someone to pass a message that he wants to see you." Jean Hauser narrowed his eyes and thought of some of Jean Yi's recent actions. He still had some ability, but compared to his determination, it wasn't enough. "I won't see him." Jean Hauser stood up. "Prepare the plane and fly to Lin City. Let 6th and 7th brother keep a close eye on the rest of the matters here." "Yes." Tang Hua looked at Jean Hauser's expression and had the rare thought of joking with him. "Do you want to see sister-in-law?" It had been 2 months since Jean Hauser last returned to Lin City. Jean Hauser glared at Tang Hua. He didn't deny it, but his footsteps quickened. In the past 2 months, Sherman Wan's life had been very smooth. After the French competition, the studio recruited 2 more newcomers. The newcomers' abilities weren't bad. After trying them out for more than 2 months, she realized that they were all promising talents. The design concept and ideas were also very compatible with her. The studio's business was booming, and she also began to get involved in work, making herself busy. Ever since that day, Jean Hauser never came to look for her again. She had dreamed of that man. She dreamed that he had secretly made the key to her house again and came to her house to see her. However, when she woke up, she realized that it was a dream. After she woke up, she even smelled John Hauser's aura in the room. This made her wonder if she was hallucinating. Fortunately, she never dreamed of Jean Hauser again after that day. This made her relax, but at the same time, she felt a little disappointed. It was impossible to forget, not for the rest of her life. Whether it was their first encounter when she was 12 years old or everything after their reunion. For Sherman Wan, those were memories engraved in the depths of her heart and couldn't be forgotten. She was still thinking that perhaps she needed more time to force herself to forget everything. However, before she could give herself time to calm down, Mother sure couldn't sit still anymore. Ever since she saw Jean Hauser last time, Mother sure had been worried. She originally thought that Sherman Wan was a child who knew her limits, but she never expected that she would actually have something to do with someone who had a fiancé. This wasn't something Mother sure could tolerate. After thinking about it, she felt that she had cared too little about Sherman Wan. So when she returned home, she thought about it carefully and felt that she still had to let Sherman Wan go on a blind date. The people she knew outside were so unreliable, but a blind date was different. The people she met on a blind date were, firstly, they knew each other well, and secondly, as a mother, she could help check them out. What could be more suitable and ideal than this? After thinking it through, Mother sure took Sherman Wan's matter to heart. The unlucky one was Sherman Wan. Her mother arranged blind dates every 2 or 3 days. As for the blind dates, most of them were from the town. Other than the town, there were also some distant relatives who were far away and had no relationship with Sherman Wan. When they heard that Mother Sure was looking for someone to go on a blind date with Sherman Wan, they introduced them. From the town, from the county, and from Lin City. Sherman Wan was extremely annoyed, but she couldn't refuse. As soon as she refused, Mother Sure asked, "Are you still unable to forget that guy's surname John?" As soon as these words came over, in order to prove that she had forgotten about that guy's surname John, Sherman Wan had been on many blind dates during this period of time. That afternoon, she was just about to ask Xiao Ji to order takeout. Her phone rang. It was still Mother Sure. Without exception, it was about her blind date again. First, she talked about the man's conditions, then how good he was. Of course, all the blind dates, without exception, were able to accept marrying into the family. They were willing to be a live-in son-in-law, and the child they gave birth to would be surnamed Sure. Sometimes, Sherman Wan couldn't help but admire her. Where did her mother find so many people who were willing to agree to her family's conditions? Or could it be that men nowadays had already settled for the next best thing? She heard that the ratio of men to women was out of balance. In 2 years, there would be at least 30 million bachelors. In the past, Ming-wan didn't believe it, but now that she thought about it, it might really be true. After all, if it weren't for the fact that so many men couldn't get a wife, how could they casually agree to such conditions? She sighed in her heart and finally hung up the phone. However, not long after, her phone rang again. Ming-wan was already weak. "Hey, what's wrong?" "Hello, Mom." Afraid that Mother sure would miss her for a long time again, she spoke first. "I understand. Don't remind me anymore. Tonight at 7 p.m., Starlight Cafe. Don't worry, since I promised you, I will naturally go." However, the person on the other end of the phone was a familiar voice to Ming-wan. "Ming-wan, are you going on a blind date?" Ming-wan was stunned for a moment. Only then did she realize that she had hung up the phone without looking at the caller ID. "Wan Xianying? It's me." Wan Xianying's voice sounded a little mischievous. "Ming-wan is going on a blind date, but she actually didn't consider me. It really makes me sad." "Wan Xianying." Ming-wan really couldn't respond to this. "You, just cancel your blind date tonight. With me around, what blind date do you need?" "How?" "That was arranged by my mother." "Do you have Annie's phone number? Do you need me to call her personally to explain?" Wan Xianying stopped fooling around. How could Ming-wan dare to let him contact Mother Shi? It wouldn't be good if there was a misunderstanding. "I'm not fooling around. I'm serious." Wan Xianying. Ming-wan had a headache. "Don't cause trouble. I'll solve it myself." Using the excuse that she was going to eat, Ming-wan sent Wan Xianying away. After hanging up the phone, Ming-wan was in a daze for a long time. What she liked didn't like her. What she liked didn't like her. It really was. Ming-wan thought about it and didn't continue to take this matter to heart. Right now, she had received another order, and the other party specifically asked her to design it. So she busied herself again. When it was time to get off work, Ming-wan, who didn't want to give up, decided to go to Starlight Cafe. Little G, Little Chio, and the others hadn't gotten off work yet. When they saw Ming-wan's fearless expression, they were a little amused. It was a secret of the whole studio that Ming-wan was forced to go on a blind date. After all, Mother Shi had specially come to the studio before she left last time. Firstly, he wanted to see his daughter's working environment and thank these people for taking care of her. Secondly, he was here to see if there were any suitable candidates for his daughter. Later on, he would call from time to time to arrange blind dates. If Ming-wan didn't pick up the phone, someone would pick it up for her. In this way, the entire studio knew about it. Their expressions of watching a good show provoked Ming-wan. She gritted her teeth and glared at those people. "If you guys keep laughing, you won't get your bonus this month." Xiao Ji and the others didn't dare to laugh. Ming-wan finally felt much better. However, he still had no choice but to go to Starlight Cafe. It was said that the location of the blind date was arranged by the blind date. It was quite close to Ming-wan's studio. Even if Ming-wan was unwilling, she had to admit it. The person arranged by Mother Shi was quite reliable. There were very few weirdos like what they said on the internet. That was true. After Ming-wan saw Zhan Haoze, she became paranoid. Although there were quite a few men, they all wanted to dig up the 18 generations of each other's ancestors. Under such circumstances, the blind dates that appeared in front of Ming-wan were really acceptable. After entering the door, Ming-wan's gaze subconsciously searched for her, who she didn't know was the 18th or 19th blind date. Before she came, Ming-wan had already sent the photo to her phone. She hadn't had the time to look at it. Now, she took out her phone and took a look. The bespectacled man looked gentle and cultured. He wasn't her type. Now that he was here, she had to meet him. Looking around, she didn't find her blind date. Ming-wan picked up a seat and sat down. She picked up her phone and scrolled through Weibo. There was one hot topic today, and it was asking about the weirdo blind dates you've met. Ming-wan casually glanced at it and looked at the variety of weirdo men on it. She agreed with Mother Shi's taste a lot. To be honest, if it weren't for the fact that she couldn't forget about Zhan Haoze, she would have randomly picked one of the blind dates that Ming-wan had chosen. It wouldn't have been too bad. However, today's blind date didn't appear for a long time. Ming-wan looked at the time. It had already been 10 minutes since 7 o'clock, but the blind date hadn't arrived yet. This had never happened before. Could something have happened on the way? Ming Wan didn't want to think so, but she still had to think of calling to contact him. However, before she could get through, someone had already sat down opposite her. Ming Wan. Wan Xianying was holding a large bouquet of roses in his hand. Looking at Ming Wan's surprised face, he smiled brightly. Long time no see. Ming Wan wasn't in a hurry to take the flowers that Wan Xianying handed over. She didn't get through, so she was still thinking about continuing. If you want to call your blind date with the surname Chun, you don't have to. Wan Xianying reminded her very kindly. I've already talked to him just now. After he heard that I'm your boyfriend, he was very generous and said that he wished us happiness. Ming Wan didn't know what expression she was going to put on anymore. Looking at Wan Xianying, she sighed in her heart. Wan Xianying, actually, you don't have to do this. I can handle it. Wan Xianying frowned. Do you think I'm trying to help you get rid of your blind date? Isn't it? Of course not. Wan Xianying stood up angrily, then quickly sat down again. He put the bouquet of flowers aside and looked at Ming Wan's face very seriously. I'm serious. Since you want to go on a blind date, why didn't you consider me? Would I be worse than those blind dates? Stop fooling around. It was that bespectacled man just now. He didn't even do anything. He just shook his fist, and the other party retreated. How could such a man be worthy of Wan Wan? I didn't mean that. Then what did you mean? Wan Xianying originally didn't plan to meet Ming Wan this time. After all, he could only stay in Lin City for 2 days this time, and there were still many things he hadn't done. However, he originally wanted to make a call to make his presence known in front of Ming Wan, but he didn't expect to hear about Edith, which she was going on a blind date. We're not suitable. What's not suitable? Wan Xianying didn't understand. You're talking about family background. My family isn't the kind of family that looks after their disciples. Our Wan family also has a precedent of marriage alliances with small families. You're talking about feelings. I'm sincere to you. Isn't that better than those blind dates that we've only met a few times? Besides, even if you feel that you won't have a partner when you marry to wrong city and are unwilling, don't you still have sister-in-law? Hu Jinyao and I are childhood friends. If you really get together with me, won't you be able to keep sister-in-law company? I really can't think of how I'm not as good as those blind dates of yours. Ever since they met, Wan Xianying had always been gentle and polite. His humor didn't hide his utilitarian nature as a businessman. However, it was the first time Ming Wan had seen Wan Xianying say such a long string of words in one breath. She shifted her gaze slightly and looked at the bouquet of red roses. Because you'll never be able to meet my conditions. What do you mean? Wan Xianying didn't quite understand. On one hand, Ming Wan really wanted him to give up, and on the other hand, she was also very serious about her conditions. My mother and my father only had 2 daughters, me and my sister, and I promised my parents that if I want to get married in the future, I'll find a son-in-law. Son-in-law? Wan Xianying's expression was a little strange. What do you mean? That's right. Our family wants our son-in-law to marry into our family. The child we give birth to will have my surname. Ming Wan's words were especially firm. This time, Wan Xianying wasn't in a hurry to speak. He sat on the chair, as if he didn't expect Ming Wan to say such a thing. Oh, are you joking with me? No. Ming Wan shook her head. I'm serious. Seeing that Wan Xianying still hadn't reacted, she said very softly, Wan Xianying, don't waste time on me. I know your identity very well, so I know that your family won't let you be his son-in-law, and it's even more impossible for the child you give birth to have my surname. Since you know it's impossible, why are you so obsessed with me? Ming Wan hadn't specially inquired about Wan Xianying's family background, but there were some things that she didn't need to inquire about to know. Hu Jinyao's childhood friend had quite an impressive family background. The antique shop under his name was almost making a lot of money every day. He had a family background, and he had an external appearance. How could such a man agree to marry into the family? Ming Wan said all she had to say. She took advantage of Wan Xianying's days to stand up. She said that she was going to the bathroom, but she was actually giving Wan Xianying time to digest her words. She believed that Wan Xianying understood and might leave later. She went into the bathroom and washed her face to calm down. No matter what, today's blind date was avoided. After all, with Wan Xianying around, she didn't need to send away the previous blind date. However, she was happy too early. The water on her face hadn't dried yet when Mothershire called. "What's wrong with you? Are you with that John guy again? Why did I hear that you didn't go on a blind date properly, but got someone to chase that person away?" "Mom, it's nothing like that. If it's not John, then who is it?" Wan, don't tell me you didn't want to go on a blind date, so you found a random man to brush me off?" "I didn't, Mom." Shimeng Wan felt that sometimes she really couldn't talk to Mother Shi. While she was still thinking about how to explain, she kept walking forward. She walked a little too fast and didn't notice that there was someone in front of her. The moment her body bumped into someone, the phone in her palm almost flew out. When the phone left her palm, Shimeng Wan wanted to grab it, but the person was one step ahead of her. He caught the phone and placed it in her hand. Shimeng Wan stood there and subconsciously pinched it, but she couldn't care less about listening to Mother Shi's words. She just stared blankly at the person in front of her. The two of them hadn't seen each other for almost 2 months. The man in front of her was still tall, but his expression was tired. He had also lost a lot of weight. At this moment, he was looking at her. His eyes were curved, and he seemed to be full of gentleness. Shimeng Wan was shocked by his gaze. She even forgot that Mother Shi was still talking on the other end of the phone. It wasn't until Mother Shi roared again that she casually said that she had something to do and hung up the phone. Just as she hung up the phone, her body was pulled into the arms of the man in front of her. He hugged her a little hard, but he restrained himself from hurting her. He gently rubbed his chin against the top of her hair. Shimeng Wan's body stiffened. She didn't expect Zhan Haoze to appear in front of her again. Wan. She heard his voice. "I miss you so much." It was a gentle voice without a trace of hostility. Accompanied by his hug, he revealed his intentions in such a simple manner. Shimeng Wan couldn't move for a moment. She thought that it might be because she had suppressed herself too much for the past 2 months, so she was hallucinating. Otherwise, why would she see Zhan Haoze in broad daylight? It was one thing to see Zhan Haoze, but to see such a gentle Zhan Haoze. "You," she wanted to speak. Her lips moved, but she didn't know what to say. Zhan Haoze gently tightened his arms and hugged her waist. He used half of his strength to pull her body closer to him. Wan, I miss you so much." He said it again. The weather in Lin City was getting colder, but it wasn't cold. The man was wearing a shirt and no tie. The temperature of his chest was burning her face. She couldn't help but raise her head to look at him. He was also looking at her. The moment their eyes met, he lowered his head and accurately kissed her lips. At that moment, Shimeng Wan seemed to see fireworks exploding in the sky. Chapter 693. Like and love couldn't be restrained. No matter how hard you tried, when you liked someone, you couldn't hide your eyes or your expression. No matter how much homework you did and how much psychological preparation you had, it was useless. That low voice of, "I miss you," made Shimeng Wan lose all her armor. She had thought many times that she might meet him again, but she didn't expect to meet him like this. She thought that 2 months was enough for her to do psychological preparation, enough for her to forget the person in front of her, and then she could return to her usual indifference. But when she really met him, she realized that her heartstrings were pulled and she couldn't control them at all. Smelling the familiar scent on his body and feeling the warmth brought by their lips and teeth, for a moment, she couldn't extricate herself. The dizziness only lasted for a moment. Shimeng Wan heard footsteps in the distance. She suddenly came back to her senses and pushed Zhan Haoze away forcefully. She took a big step back. Because she retreated too quickly, Shimeng Wan's back hit the wall behind her. She felt a little pain, so she stabilized her body and stared at the man in front of her. Her gaze was very complicated. She lowered her eyes, and after a few breaths, the trace of charm just now completely dissipated. When she looked up again, Shimeng Wan's eyes were filled with rationality and not a trace of emotion. An uncontrollable kiss was already the limit she could give. She couldn't do or afford to give more. She looked at Zhan Haoze warily and turned around to leave. However, Zhan Haoze blocked in front of her. Wan, Didn't she like him just now? Zhan Haoze, we've already broken up. Shi Mengwan said this very calmly. Zhan Haoze's eyes darkened. Wan, I didn't agree. That's your business. I thought we had already reached a tacit understanding. Wan, sorry, I won't be entangled with a man who has a fiancée. Shi Mengwan's attitude was firm. Zhan Haoze went forward to stop her, but his phone rang just now. The number on it made him have no choice but to answer the call first. It was at this moment that Shi Mengwan left the corridor. When Zhan Haoze hung up the phone and walked out, he couldn't see Shi Mengwan anymore. Of course, Wan Xianying also disappeared. Shi Mengwan sat in her car and looked at Wan Xianying, who got into the car uninvited. She felt a little helpless. She thought she had made herself clear. In fact, the 2-year agreement that Shi Mengwan mentioned at that time was indeed to shut Grandma Shi's mouth and stop her from having the idea of letting her parents adopt a child. But the other reason was that she wasn't sure how far she could go with Zhan Haoze. Before that, she didn't want to get married, nor did she want to fall in love. He could use this as an excuse to avoid a lot of trouble. However, she didn't expect her mother to be so capable. Not only was she not repelled by her excuses and reasons, but she also found suitable men to go on blind dates with her again and again. On this point, she was really convinced. The car stopped at her apartment, and she looked at Wan Xianying helplessly. She had just said that she was not feeling well and wanted to go home to rest. Wan Xianying suggested that he send her home, no matter how she refused. When she reached the parking lot, he took her car keys and got in the car. Since you're not feeling well, let me drive. He knew that this was just her excuse, but Shi Mengwan really couldn't kick him out of the driver's seat. I'm already home. As Shi Mengwan spoke, she reached out her hand to Wan Xianying, gesturing for him to get out of the car and return the car keys to her. Wan Xianying got out of the car, but he didn't return the car keys to her. He was also very tall, and he just stood in front of the car and looked at Shi Mengwan. That marrying into the family was something you deliberately made to make things difficult for me, right? What era was it now? Who would make such a request? Shi Mengwan's expression didn't change. She was very clear about Wan Xianying's family background. He was Hu Jinyao's childhood friend, so he probably wouldn't be too bad. No, I'm serious. Wan Xianying looked at her, seemingly a little conflicted. Seriously speaking, putting aside the 1 or 2 illegitimate children his old man had accidentally created outside. His mother only gave birth to him. He didn't even have a sister or brother, so he had a very good relationship with Hu Jinyao and the others. Shi Mengwan's condition really stumped him. Even if he was willing, his parents wouldn't agree. Wan Xianying had a headache now. Even if this was indeed Shi Mengwan's condition to make things difficult for him, he couldn't do it. Mengwan, what do you think? Let's each take a step back. Shi Mengwan looked at him, not understanding what he meant by taking a step back. If you're willing to agree to be with me, we can have 2 children. One will take your surname, and the other will take my surname. How about that? Shi Mengwan looked at Wan Xianying. At a certain moment, she was really touched. With Wan Xianying's family background and status, to be able to say such words was already a lot of sincerity and sincerity. Wan Xianying, thank you. Shi Mengwan thanked him sincerely. Thank you so much. She didn't say more, but what else did Wan Xianying not understand? Yes, thank me, but you can't accept me, right? Wan Xianying, Mengwan, tell me the truth. Wan Xianying thought of what he had seen in France and some of the things that happened later. Do you have someone in your heart? Shi Mengwan was stunned for a moment. When she met Wan Xianying's clear eyes, she hesitated for a second and quickly nodded. Yes, I have someone I like. Wan Xianying looked as if he had expected it. No wonder. The atmosphere was a little silent. Shi Mengwan didn't know what she could say. She stood there, feeling a little awkward. It's fine. Wan Xianying was much calmer than her. I saw it a long time ago. Shi Mengwan's expression was strange. Wan Xianying smiled softly. If you don't have someone you like, why can't you see an outstanding man like me? Don't you think so? His words made the expression on Shi Mengwan's face relax a little. She chuckled. Because I'm blind. When she smiled, Wan Xianying also relaxed. There were some things that he didn't say after seeing through. But if he really said it, it would be better. All right, then I hope you won't be blind for too long, Wan Xianyang continued. Otherwise, the fake blind will become really blind. After rejecting Shi Mengwan's suggestion to send him back, Wan Xianyang walked out of the neighborhood and left. Shi Mengwan looked at his back view, and the corners of her lips pursed into a straight line again. After being entangled with John Hauser for such a long time, she couldn't break it off, and it was still messy. After going back and forth so many times, wasn't she just blind? It was just that she didn't feel like she could control her heart. Moreover, her feelings for John Hauser weren't as simple as just being attracted to him. After more than a year of relying on each other, she had never forgotten the care and companionship she had once had. She shook her head and didn't let herself think of John Hauser again. No matter how difficult some things were, she had to learn to let go. Shi Mengwan didn't see John Hauser come looking for her that night, which made her feel relieved again. Her personality could be considered flamboyant, and her willpower could definitely be considered firm. However, all her rationality would become vulnerable in front of John Hauser. Perhaps she needed to stay away for a while. Why not fly to Rome City for a few days after she was done with this job? Not only could she accompany Su Qingsang, but she could also avoid John Hauser. Shi Mengwan had a good idea, but she didn't expect to see John Hauser guarding the door the next morning when she opened the door to go to work. Seeing that it was him, Shi Mengwan subconsciously took a step back, but when she thought that she had to go to work, she took another step forward. This step back and forward allowed her to stand in front of John Hauser. His tall stature made the entire door look extremely cramped. He also successfully blocked Shi Mengwan's way out. John Hauser, please move aside. I want to go out. I bought you breakfast. John Hauser acted as if he didn't see her cold face. You probably haven't had breakfast yet. Go to school after you eat. Shi Mengwan stared at the bag in John Hauser's hand. The logo on it was a very famous Hong Kong-style breakfast restaurant in Lin City. Retracting her gaze, Shi Mengwan's hand clenched the bag tightly. No need, thank you. I've eaten. Please move aside. His stiff tone was an obvious rejection, but in John Hauser's eyes, such a rejection wasn't thorough enough. He suddenly moved his face closer to Shi Mengwan. His sudden action startled Shi Mengwan, and her body naturally took a step back. John Hauser used the hand that wasn't carrying breakfast to place on her waist to stabilize her body. At the same time, he continued to move forward in front of her. The tip of his nose gently swept past her lips, and finally, he hugged her waist and took a step forward. The two of them stood together in the room. John Hauser hooked the tip of his foot and easily closed the door. Let's have breakfast. He raised the bag in his hand. John Hauser. Shi Mengwan pulled his hand away and said angrily, I've eaten. You've eaten? Are you sure? There's nothing to be uncertain about. John Hauser faced her and bent down again. Your mouth is full of the smell of toothpaste, but there's no taste of breakfast. He said such frivolous words with a serious expression, which made Shi Mengwan's face turn red. She bit her lip and pursed her lips tightly. After realizing what she had done, she loosened her grip a little. John Hauser, are you all right? Even if I haven't eaten, what does it have to do with you? I can go to the studio to eat. Can you move aside now? John Hauser didn't move aside. He grabbed her hand and led her to the dining table. He was much stronger than her. Shi Mengwan tried a few times, but she couldn't break free. She could only let him pull her away. John Hauser placed the bag in his hand on the table, opened it, and took out several lunch boxes from inside. He placed them out one by one. Let's eat. Shi Mengwan was finally able to break free from his hand when he placed the lunch boxes. She took a step back and stood about a meter away from John Hauser. John Hauser, we've already broken up. If he didn't hear it clearly yesterday, she didn't mind saying it again today. John Hauser turned around and faced the coldness in her eyes. He took a step forward and stood in front of her. I didn't agree. I don't need your consent. She had already decided and wouldn't change it. Wanwan, do you have to do this? John Hauser, do you have to do this? Shi Mengwan had a headache. She was really trying hard to control herself, and she was also trying hard to forget him. Why did he still have to appear? You go. Shi Mengwan took a step back and pointed in the direction of the door. She didn't want this. She didn't like him coming and going as he pleased. If he couldn't afford the feeling she wanted, then he shouldn't provoke her anymore. Jean House's brows furrowed tightly. Wan. He wanted to explain himself, but his phone rang again. He glanced at Shermang Wan and picked up the phone. The news from the other end of the phone made his expression change. He glanced at Shermang Wan with a serious expression. I'll be right there. After hanging up the phone, he put away his phone and looked at Shermang Wan. I have something urgent to deal with. I have to go out now. No matter how unhappy you are, you still have to eat breakfast. After saying this, he resisted the urge to hug Shermang Wan. Instead, he left in a hurry. Shermang Wan looked at his back and felt the seriousness in his words just now. Although he hadn't appeared during this period of time, he had obviously lost some weight today. Jean House's footsteps were a little fast, so fast that Shermang Wan didn't even have time to ask him what had happened. However, her intuition told her that this matter wasn't ordinary. When the car stopped at the entrance of the first hospital, Tang Hua had already come out. When he saw Jean House, he walked in front of him in a few steps. The car accident happened an hour ago. At that time, Miss Chen was about to go to work. Just as she was about to reach the Chen Corporation's building, a car rushed out from the corner and hit Miss Chen's car. Tang Hua said very clearly, I've already called the police, and the car that caused the accident has been detained, but I think it's not ordinary. He didn't say the rest, but the meaning was quite clear. This accident wasn't an accident, but man-made. Jean House didn't ask further and went straight into the hospital. When he went in, Chun Feifei was still being resuscitated. He couldn't ask how the doctor was doing. Not long after, Chen Yongchang also came. The moment he came for Jean House. Without giving Jean House a chance to speak, he directly waved his fist at him. However, before his fist could touch Jean House had already taken a step back to avoid it. Chen Yongchang was very angry. He pointed his finger at Jean House. Ungrateful. You're ungrateful. I want you to take good care of Feifei. Is this how you take care of her? It's fine if you don't show up, but as soon as you show up, you sent Feifei to the hospital? Uncle, don't call me that. I can't afford it. Chen Yongchang was really angry. Jean House couldn't refute it, and he didn't intend to defend himself. He had already asked Tang Hua to investigate why such a thing happened. The specific situation would have to wait for Tang Hua to finish investigating. However, he didn't wait for Tang Hua to give the results of the investigation. Jean House's phone rang again. There were a few photos on the screen. One was of Chun Feifei getting into a car accident this morning, and another was of him and Chun Feifei together. There was also a photo of Chun Feifei alone. 3 photos and a sentence. It's not over yet. Jean House's heart skipped a beat. There is no need to wait for the results of the investigation. This was the work of the Jean family. He had thought that Jean Kuan and Uncle Chi might retaliate, but he didn't expect that the other party would actually target Chun Feifei. No, he shouldn't be surprised. This was more like their style of doing things. Jean House held his phone with a solemn expression. He turned around and was about to leave, but was stopped by Chen Yongchang. Where are you going? Where else can you go? Let me tell you, I won't let this matter go just like that. You must give our Feifei an explanation. Jean House was silent. He couldn't give him an explanation. The only thing he could do was to avenge Chun Feifei so that those blind people wouldn't come to his door to cause trouble. Uncle, don't worry. I will give you an explanation. This time, Jean House wasn't in a hurry to leave. He waited outside the resuscitation room for Chun Feifei to wake up. After the doctor rescued her, he told them that Chun Feifei was out of danger. Now, there was no problem for the time being. Jean House heaved a sigh of relief, but he couldn't completely relax. Chun Feifei's injuries weren't serious. She would be fine after a few days of rest. In his opinion, this didn't seem like they were deliberately trying to kill Chun Feifei. Instead, it seemed like they were giving him a warning. Realizing this, Jean House suddenly had a bad premonition. Soon, he received a new text message on his phone. Do you feel relieved? Jean House, don't be happy too early. Do you think that just because you've found a shield, we won't know who you really want to protect? Jean House's heart skipped a beat. He almost immediately thought of Shi Mingwan. With his thought, he couldn't sit still anymore. He didn't care how long it would take for Chun Feifei to wake up. He hurriedly turned around to look for Shi Mingwan. Nothing could happen to Shi Mingwan. Along the way, he kept urging the driver to drive faster. A little faster. His phone didn't ring again, but this kind of moment was even more torturous. His hand on his knee clenched tightly into a fist. He was still careless. He should have been more reliable. Shi Mingwan didn't eat the breakfast prepared by Zhan Haoze, but she really wasn't a wasteful person. After thinking about it, she brought breakfast to the company and directly distributed it to the other people in the studio. But even so, she still felt that it wasn't enough. There was a ball of fire in her heart. That ball of fire made her want to burn Zhan Haoze regardless of anything else. She was still thinking about how she should face Zhan Haoze the next time he came, or whether she should use a more intense method. No matter what, she couldn't continue like this. Just as she made up her mind, she forced herself to divert her attention and stop thinking about Zhan Haoze. On the other end, Zhan Haoze suddenly rushed into her office. Wan. Xiao Ji followed behind Zhan Haoze and looked at her helplessly. Her expression was slightly conflicted. Sister, sure, I can't stop him. Wan. Zhan Haoze heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Shi Mingwan was safe and sound. He went forward to hug her. He needed to confirm her safety, but Shi Mingwan suddenly raised her hand and placed it on his chest. Anger gradually appeared on her face again. Chapter 694. Shi Mingwan refused to be entangled like this. She needed to forget Zhan Haoze in the shortest time possible and not let him appear in front of her again and again. However, Zhan Haoze acted as if he didn't notice the ugly expression on her face. He suddenly reached out and held her in his arms. Shi Mingwan was stunned for a moment. She wanted to push him away, but he hugged her very tightly. Zhan Haoze's chin touched the top of Shi Mingwan's hair. Smelling the fragrance of her hair, he felt his mood slowly calm down. He tightened his grip on her waist. The feeling of worrying that something would happen to her made him lose his mind for a moment. Shi Mingwan didn't let him hug her for too long. She suddenly raised her elbow and slammed it hard into his chest. Zhan Haoze wasn't prepared for her to attack him. He took 2 steps back and let go of her at the same time. Shi Mingwan took a deep breath. Her willpower really wasn't strong, especially every time she encountered something related to Zhan Haoze. But this didn't mean that she was someone without a bottom line or principles. On the contrary, it was precisely because she had principles and bottom lines that she couldn't accept Zhan Haoze's actions. Zhan Haoze, do you have to do this? Did he have to use such a method to constantly get close to her and shake her willpower? Wan. Zhan Haoze thought about Chun Feifei's car accident, and his brows furrowed tightly. Those explanations weren't easy to say, and he didn't want her to know about those worries. However, looking at Shi Mingwan's clueless expression, he hesitated again. He didn't speak, and Shi Mingwan didn't know what she could say, so she also remained silent. In the silent silence, the two of them faced each other. After a few minutes, Shi Mingwan finally couldn't stand the situation in front of her. She didn't want to speak anymore, nor did she look at Zhan Haoze. She turned around and returned to her seat. She still had an order to finish. She wanted to finish it quickly so that she could go to Rong City to see Su Qing-sing. Although she didn't lack people to take care of her now, and she was a doctor in the obstetrics and gynecology department, she still wanted to see her with her own eyes and make sure that she was safe. Just as her hand touched the mouse, Zhan Haoze walked in front of her. He held her hand, making it impossible for her to continue for a while. Zhan Haoze, even if he was crazy, he should have had enough, right? Come with me to Qingsheng. He wanted to go to Qing City to personally solve the problems of the Zhan family. Before that, he had to put her in front of him, under his eyes, before he could feel at ease. Shi Mingwan blinked. For a moment, she thought that the man in front of her was possessed. What did you say? Come with me to Qingsheng. As if he was afraid that Shi Mingwan didn't understand, he didn't mind explaining more clearly. My father is from Qing City. My home is also in Qingsheng. I want to take you back. Shi Mengwan looked at his hand that was holding hers and chuckled. You mean bring my parents? Zhang Haoze frowned. He didn't mean that. In his heart, no one in the Zhang family was qualified to be the head of the family. You don't need to see them. In Zhang Haoze's heart, they were just a group of unimportant people. In fact, between him and Zhang Kuan, it was a matter of life and death. Shi Mengwan misunderstood his meaning. She couldn't tell what she was thinking. The only thing she could be sure of was that Zhang Haoze had never thought of bringing her to meet his family. Zhang Haoze, you should go. I won't go to Qing City with you. She had heard from Shi Mengwan that Zhang Haoze's father had married another woman and had a stepmother. She reckoned that it wasn't just a stepmother. The stepmother might have her own children. Under such circumstances, Zhang Haoze's relationship with his family was definitely not good. She wouldn't really ask to see his family. However, Zhang Haoze's words just now made her feel a little uncomfortable. Since he didn't want to bring her to Qing City to meet his family, why did he say that he wanted to bring her to Qing City? She pulled her hand back from Zhang Haoze's hand. The wariness on Shi Mengwan's face was even more obvious than before. Wan, the expression on Zhang Haoze's face became more and more conflicted. He wanted to mention it more or less, but he didn't know where to start. I still have something to do. If there's nothing else, President Zhang, please leave. As she spoke, she focused her attention on the screen in front of her again. Zhang Haoze was about to say something when his phone rang again. It was Tang Hua. He brought 2 pieces of news. Those 2 pieces of news made Zhang Haoze's expression change slightly. After hanging up the phone, he looked at Shi Mengwan. She was staring at the screen intently. The mouse on her hand clicked a few times, as if she wasn't affected by him at all. Zhang Haoze couldn't say the rest of his words. Wan, I might be busy for a while. When I'm done, I'll come pick you up and take you to Qing City. No need. Shi Mengwan didn't even raise her head. I'm not interested. Her cold tone was full of resistance. Zhang Haoze was helpless. Moreover, it was indeed a troubled time. He could only leave first. Wan, wait for me. I'll definitely come pick you up. At that time, if everything was settled, it would be easier to pick her up and take her to Qing City. Shi Mengwan acted as if she didn't hear him and was still focused on the work at hand. However, after Zhang Haoze left, she put down the mouse and looked at an unknown point in the distance. No one knew what she was thinking. Zhang Haoze left the office building. Tang Hua had already parked the car downstairs. He quickly got into the car. Tang Hua looked a little anxious. Boss, what do you think we should do about this? That old fart, Zhang Kuan, actually issued a kill order for boss, even though such a kill order was only issued within the Zhang family. But what kind of family was the Zhang family? In the early years, they relied on doing some unorthodox businesses to bring the Zhang family to its current state. The Zhang family had their own assassin hall. They might not be comparable to the top professional assassins in the world, but they were still quite powerful. All these years, Zhang Kuan had used this assassin hall to get rid of many of his thorns. Now, Zhang Kuan had actually used such a kill order on him. It wasn't a warning, nor was a warning. He really wanted his life. Zhang Haoze's expression had a rare trace of seriousness. Previously, he thought that Chun Feifei's injury was a warning to him, but now that he thought about it, it wasn't. Thinking back to what Uncle Chi said when he came looking for him last time, he seemed to understand a little. Whether it was the 2nd or 3rd generation of the Zhang family, they didn't have a worthy successor. Zhang Kuan was already old. It wouldn't be that easy for the Zhang family to continue the glory of the past few decades. Uncle Chi was probably behind Zhang Kuan's back and wanted him to take up the mantle of the Zhang family. However, he didn't know that his hatred for the Zhang family and Zhang Kuan had already been carved into his bones. No matter what the Zhang family did, he remained unmoved. Boss. He didn't say anything. Tang Hua was a little worried. Go back to Qing City. Zhang Haoze quickly made a decision within a few seconds. Tang Hua wasn't surprised. But if we leave, what about Chun Feifei? Actually, he wanted to ask, what about Shi Mengwan? The people from the Zhang family were just flustered for a moment. They weren't stupid. When they reacted, they would definitely understand that Chun Feifei was just a shield. She was useless at all. Jean Housé narrowed his eyes as if he had thought of something. Let's go. We'll go to the hospital before returning to Qing City. No matter what, Chun Feifei's injury this time was because of him. After all, the Chun family had saved his life. He still had to give them an explanation. The weather in Qing City had already started to turn cold. Jean Housé sat in the car and watched as the driver shook off the tail behind him for the 13th time. He glanced at the traffic behind him. Ahwa, how's the old man doing recently? He's still hanging on by a thread. He had already suffered 2 strokes, and this stroke had brought about quite serious consequences. However, Jean Cohen was lucky. He didn't die even though he was like this. He still had time to deal with Jean Housé. It was really because his previous movements were too light. Tell old 6 and old 7 to move faster. Although this was a little forceful, he had no other choice at this time. Tang Huan nodded in understanding. Okay, I believe that 6th and 7th brothers will arrange it well. Hopefully, Jean Housé hoped so, but he couldn't really let down his guard completely. In fact, the Jean family had been operating in Qing City for decades. Their power was deeply rooted, and it really wasn't something that could be completely destroyed in a short period of time. He had underestimated his enemy before. But no matter what, he wouldn't stop, even if this process was more difficult than he had thought. Jean Housé narrowed his eyes, his expression full of danger. Jean Cohen was a very subjective and very assertive person. In his heart, if there was someone who didn't do what he wanted, then it must be someone else's fault, not his. He never reflected on his own problems, so naturally, he wouldn't feel that it was his fault that the son he had taught was now reduced to a housewife with a woman. This was that woman's fault. It was that woman's problem. She was the one who seduced his son, and she was the one who made Jean Lai become like this. Since Jean Cohen had been in a shady business back then, he wasn't just ordinarily ruthless. When he knew that that woman had caused his son to become like this, he had the intention to kill her. Towards that woman, he had to get rid of her. But at first, he didn't find an opportunity to do so. Jean Lai's maternal family seemed to know something, and they were still very protective of this grandson and his grandson's child. He didn't have a chance to do so for a while, but it didn't mean that he would never have a chance to do so. He decided to wait for a while, wait for a suitable opportunity, and then get rid of that woman. At first, he didn't wait for an opportunity, which made him depressed. Later, he didn't even hesitate to bring Zhang Ji and Min Quan to his side, thinking of nurturing them for a period of time. But with Jean Lai in front of him, the other illegitimate children naturally couldn't satisfy Jean Cohen. The more dissatisfied he was, the more he hated Jean Lai, hated Jean Lai's wife. Later, Jean Cohen's opportunity finally came. Because of the change of power, Jean Lai's maternal family had encountered some trouble. He couldn't care less about Jean Lai for the time being. For Jean Cohen, this was an opportunity. Previously, because he was worried about Jean Lai's maternal family, he didn't make a move. Now that something had happened to Jean Lai's maternal family, his opportunity had come. At this time, Jean Lai and his wife had already been living outside for several years. The family of 3 lived the most ordinary life in another city. Jean Cohen, who saw the investigation information again, was still extremely angry, because after so many years, he hadn't picked out a child who could inherit his career. Jean Lai, who could inherit his career, was bewitched by a woman. He couldn't tolerate it. Jean Cohen decided to get rid of that woman. Before getting rid of her, he went to the door with the last trace of father-son relationship. In the beginning, Jean Cohen decided to be polite before using force. If Jean Lai was willing to go home with him obediently, then he could only kill that woman and let him bring that bastard home. But if Jean Lai didn't listen to him, then don't blame him for being impolite. When Jean Cohen came to the door, Jean Lai was naturally very surprised. He had no idea that his father had actually targeted him a few years ago. Jean Lai was still happy to see his father, but that happiness didn't last long. Jean Lai, you disappoint me too much. Ever since he was young, Jean Cohen, who had always been cold-blooded and indifferent, still put on such a face. Dad, don't call me. Jean Cohen was very angry. For a woman, Where did you put the honor of the Jean family in our family? Jean Lai was silent. He had indeed let down Jean Cohen's nurturing. However, Dad, Roliu is a good woman. If you had really come into contact with her, you would definitely like her. Impossible. It's true. Jean Lai was still too naive. At this time, he was still trying to convince Shi Cohen to accept his wife. Roliu is a very good woman. Dad, you really shut up. Jean Cohen glared at his son in front of him, wishing he could strangle him to death. However, the purpose of his visit today wasn't to argue with his son. Jean Cohen's face was cold. He took out a gun and threw it in front of Jean Lai. Take it, Dad. Jean Cohen was shocked. He wasn't unfamiliar with guns, but after leaving the Jean family, he hadn't touched one for many years. You're my son. You can't be so cowardly, right? Jean Cohen sneered. Don't say that I, your father, didn't give you a chance. What do you mean, Dad? Pick it up. Jean Cohen shouted. Jean Lai hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he still picked up the gun. Dad? Kill her. As Jean Cohen spoke, he pointed at Xiao, who had just come down from upstairs and had just settled her bad boy. Dad? Jean Lai had been living too comfortably in the past few years. It was so comfortable that he had forgotten what the Jean family relied on to make their fortune. He looked at the gun in his hand, then at Jean Cohen. In the end, as if he was throwing a hot potato, he threw the gun out and threw it on the coffee table. Dad, are you crazy? Jean Lai's expression was full of shock and accusation. I'll say. Jean Cohen looked at his useless child and pushed the gun to Jean Lai's side again. Didn't you say that you wanted to go back to the Jean family? Since that's the case, then kill this woman. If she dies, you can go back to the Jean family. Dad, if you say that, I won't go back to the Jean family for the rest of my life. Chapter 695. Jean Hauser woke up from his dream with a start. The gunshot seemed to still be lingering in his ears. His head hurt a little. He rubbed his temples, but he couldn't suppress the headache no matter what. Ever since he returned to Qinsheng, he couldn't restrain the nightmares from that day. Even if he wanted to resist, it would be useless. He got up and looked at the gloomy night sky outside. He took out his phone, unlocked it, and looked at Shi Mengwan's number on it. In the end, he didn't pull it out. At dawn, he woke up early and went to the gym downstairs to work out. He was used to getting up early. He had the habit of doing morning exercises every day. Not only morning exercises, but also boxing. The security of Sakura Manor was quite good. Moreover, he had arranged many people to guard this villa, both openly and secretly. When he came out of the gym, the staff had already prepared breakfast. He finished reading the financial news while eating breakfast. As soon as he put down the bowl in his hand, Tang Hua entered the door with a rare, solemn expression. Boss, something happened to Six's brother. Jean Hauser looked at Tang Hua with a malicious expression. What's going on? Speak clearly. Last time, you asked Six's brother to keep an eye on the club under the Jean family's name. He seemed to have found a breakthrough. The day before yesterday, he told me that he wanted to go in and take a look. But until today, I haven't received any news from him. Tang Hua's face was a little anxious. This group of people had been together since they were young, so they were clear about their character. Boss, old Six isn't someone who doesn't know what's important. If nothing had happened to him, no matter what, there would definitely be news. Now that there's been no news from him for an entire day, I'm afraid. Tang Hua didn't say it out loud, but he believed that Jean Hauser would understand. Jean Hauser was silent. He thought about Uncle Chi's words last time in the killing order. His expression was solemn. Have you searched? He knew about the clubhouse that Tang Hua was talking about. Previously, Old Six had said that he wanted to go and check it out. He knew that it wasn't going to be easy. He tried to stop Old Sixth, but he couldn't do so. I've tried, but there's no news yet. Jean Hauser's expression was solemn. He sat there with his brows tightly furrowed. The Jean family couldn't be dealt with in a day. After such a long time, he had slowly laid out his plans and slowly closed the net. Ever since he decided to go against the Jean family, he knew that this was a road full of thorns. No matter what, the Jean family was a family that had been accumulated for so many years. It was impossible to destroy them overnight. He had this understanding. However, This understanding did not include sacrificing the lives of those he regarded as his closest friends. Let old 7 take some people to find out where old 6 is and bring him back. But Tang Hua looked like he wanted to say something, but he hesitated. He didn't say what he didn't say, but Zhang Haoze understood what he meant. If old 7 brought people there and didn't manage to bring old 6 out, he might end up getting himself killed instead. If that was the case, then it really wasn't a good thing. Zhang Haoze also realized that it was not appropriate to let 7th brother look for someone. Perhaps he should directly find a breakthrough point from the Zhang family. His phone rang again. The person on the other end of the phone was Uncle Chi. I think we can meet now. I don't see any need to meet him. Zhang Haoze had a very bad impression of Uncle Chi. Is that so? Uncle Chi smiled and said a name. Then he asked, "Are you sure you don't want to see me?" Zhang Haoze's expression was ugly. He gripped the phone in his palm tightly and resisted the urge to throw it out. 2 hours later, Zhang Haoze met Uncle Chi in the office of Qingqing Company. Uncle Chi's expression was much more smug than the last time he came. Zhang Haoze was expressionless. Even if he was in a weak position, he wouldn't admit defeat in front of the Zhang family. Uncle Chi wasn't in a hurry to speak. He slowly took out a few photos from his pocket and placed them on Zhang Haoze's desk. In the photo, a man who looked to be less than 30 years old was tied to a chair. The man's body was obviously injured, as if he had been beaten. No matter how calm Zhang Haoze was, his expression still changed slightly when he saw old 6 like this. But he quickly calmed down. He looked at Uncle Chi coldly. His slightly narrowed eyes were sinister and dangerous. Uncle Chi wasn't annoyed by his glare. He chuckled. "How about we discuss a condition now?" Zhang Haoze frowned. His expression was very cold. "I don't think there's anything to discuss between us." "Why do you say that?" "I don't believe you don't know what the current situation is." Zhang Haoze didn't answer him. Uncle Chi leaned forward slightly. "I can guarantee that you won't be able to eat the Zhang family in one go now. But if you're willing to take a step back, you can. Why don't you take a step back and we'll both be happy?" If possible, Uncle Chi really didn't want to beg a junior like this. But he had no choice. Zhang Yi, Zhang Li, Zhang Yang, and the others, ever since the last time, not only did they not unite as one, but they also caused more and more trouble. Zhang Li's ability wasn't bad, but the Zhang family had a big business. He hadn't taken on all the responsibilities in the past. There were many things that he couldn't make decisions about. He really didn't have Zhang Kuen's demeanor back then. If it wasn't for the fact that Uncle Chi really couldn't find anyone, he wouldn't have put down his old face and come here to beg Zhang Haoze. Zhang Haoze curled up the corners of his lips. "Take a step back." "How?" "How about you take over the Zhang family and let the Zhang family become yours? Are you sure you can make the decision?" Zhang Kuen isn't dead yet. He really called Zhang Kuen's name. His expression was full of ridicule without the slightest bit of respect. Uncle Chi wasn't angry. "I don't believe that you don't know what kind of situation the old man is in now. So now, I can make the decision." Uncle Chi had been by Zhang Kuen's side for more than 30 years. In the Zhang family, he had absolute authority. He was also confident that as long as he was around, those people wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. Zhang Haoze was silent. He didn't respond to Uncle Chi's words. Uncle Chi wasn't in a hurry either. He was extremely patient today, waiting for Zhang Haoze to compromise. Tang Hua, who was standing beside Zhang Haoze, looked at his conflicted face. His lips moved, but he wanted to say something, but he stopped. As if sensing his subordinate's thoughts, Zhang Haoze picked up the stack of photos and looked at the complacency and certainty on Uncle Chi's face. He tore off the photos one by one. "I refuse." "You?" Uncle Chi, who hadn't expected such an answer, was stunned on the spot. He was stunned for nearly a minute. When Zhang Haoze asked Tang Hua to chase him away, he suddenly placed his hands on the desk. "Zhang Haoze, are you sure? There's nothing to be uncertain about. Sixth brother's life wouldn't be in danger for the time being." Uncle Chi was afraid that he would use extreme measures, so he didn't dare to hurt sixth brother for the time being. And he was confident that he could bring sixth brother out. "Don't you want Lu Tao's life anymore?" Lu Tao was referring to sixth brother. "He's just a subordinate. But if you dare to hurt him, I will repay the Jean family 10 times, 100 times. Jean Hausa wasn't afraid of Uncle Chi's threat. You can try. Really? Uncle Chi sneered and took out a few more photos from his pocket. Yes, you're amazing. You don't care about Lu Tao's life, so don't you care about her life? This time, it was a photo of Shi Mengwan on the desk. One of them was a photo of Shi Mengwan alone, while the second photo was of Jean Hausa and Shi Mengwan dancing on the dance floor together in France. Jean Hausa's gaze became sinister and dangerous. He almost couldn't help but stand up, but he quickly sat down again. If you dare to touch a single strand of her hair, do you believe that I will let you have a taste of what it's like to beg for death? Don't get agitated. Uncle Chi didn't care about his threat at all. If you're so agitated, we won't be able to calm down later, don't you think? Jean Hausa knew that he had lost control just now. He should have acted a little calmer. This kind of weakness being grasped in the hands of others made him feel very unhappy. What exactly do you want to do? Uncle Chi smiled. Stop all your revenge, go back to the Jean family, and support the overall situation. Jean Hausa's expression was rather ugly. Uncle Chi wasn't in a hurry. He had been by Jean Cohen's side for 30 years and had walked step by step to where he was now in the Jean family. He wasn't someone to be trifled with. What if I refuse? I think you don't have a choice. Uncle Chi didn't mind telling the truth. Yes, you can also refuse, but I can't guarantee the lives of Mr. Liu and Miss Sure. Looking at Jean Hausa's gloomy face, Uncle Chi chuckled. Of course, you can also tie me up now and use me, an old fellow, to exchange hostages with the Jean family. However, I'm already so old. If I really die, I won't have any regrets. If the two of them really die with me, it'll be worth it. Don't you think so? Jean Hausa stared at Uncle Chi's face. He didn't restrain his aura at all. That pressure made even an experienced person like Uncle Chi tremble slightly. However, the more Jean Hausa acted like this, the more determined Uncle Chi was to let him return to the Jean family. Only such a person could support the Jean family. The atmosphere in the office was rather silent. Jean Hausa sat there without moving. Tang Hua, who was behind him, listened to him completely. Naturally, he wouldn't disturb him at such a time. He didn't speak, and Uncle Chi wasn't in a hurry. He didn't expect Jean Hausa to agree immediately, but he was gambling. After all, he was the child of Jean Lai and Xiao Ruoliu. Jean Hausa was like Jean Cohen, but not like him. His methods were similar, but he was afraid that there was still a soft spot in his heart. And this soft spot was enough for Uncle Chi to make use of. 10 minutes later, Jean Hausa finally said, "Okay, I agree, but I have a few conditions." "Speak." "First, this old man is old. Since his health isn't good, don't come out all the time. Rest well." This was to separate Jean Cohen. Uncle Chi was a little hesitant, but in the end, he nodded. Anyway, he was Jean Cohen's spokesperson now. He would do what Jean Cohen instructed. As long as he kept an eye on it, no one would cause trouble in front of Jean Cohen. "Okay. Second, I'll take over the Jean family. I don't want to see the other Jean family members. This is a little difficult. After all, they all have their own duties now. For the time being, they won't hinder you. If you don't agree, there's nothing to talk about. I'm that person's grandson. If you provoke me, at most, we'll fight to the death." "Okay, I agree. In any case, it wasn't much use for those idiots to stay in the Jean family. It didn't matter if they stayed or not. Third, let my people go. Also, you have to promise that you'll never touch my people. You're not allowed to hurt them." "No problem. Since you're willing to take over the Jean family, you're my master. Not only will I get people to revoke the kill order against you, but I can also get people to protect the people you care about." Protect? What did this protection mean? Jean Hausa couldn't be clearer. He looked at Uncle Chi coldly. "Give me a week. I'll arrange things and enter the company." "Okay, I'll wait for you for a week." Uncle Chi, who had received an affirmative answer, was very easy to talk to. If you think a week isn't enough, more time is fine. Uncle Chi left. Jean Hausa sat on the chair and rubbed the space between his eyebrows. Tang Hua asked worriedly, "Boss?" Jean Hausa didn't look at him. He half closed his eyes and said softly, "Don't worry. I know what I'm doing." Sherman Wan's life returned to peace. After that day, Jean Hauser never came to look for her again. In the blink of an eye, another month passed. Su Ching-song's stomach was already big. She wanted to fly to Rome City to see her a few times, but she had too many things to do. The studio recruited 2 newcomers and slowly got the hang of it. However, many clothes were requested to be mass-produced on Weibo. Of course, it wouldn't be lacking in anything, but it was still lacking a little something. If she wanted to make it big, she had to mass-produce it. Sherman Wan understood this logic. In the following time, she went to a few factories and a few raw material manufacturers. She was so busy that she had no time to care about her own matters. Mother sure had probably guessed something. Ever since the last blind date was ruined, she didn't mention asking her to go on a blind date again. This way, Sherman Wan was much quieter. That day, she went to the last factory. It was already very late when she returned to the city. Although this section of the road had been repaired, there weren't many cars. Sherman Wan drove halfway. She didn't know if it was because of stones or something else, but the car jolted. Sherman Wan quickly reacted and gripped the steering wheel tightly. Finally, after stabilizing the car, she was about to continue driving. However, she realized that the car seemed to have broken down or something. It actually didn't move. She tried to start the car a few times, but couldn't. After that, she quickly got out of the car to see what was wrong. If it didn't work, she could only call for a tow truck. Sherman Wan got out of the car and opened the front cover. She didn't know much about the problem with the car. She only did this to see how to solve it. It was already late. She was alone in this place where there was no village or shop. Just thinking about it made her a little scared. She propped up the front cover of the car and checked it with the light of her phone. With her level, she couldn't find anything wrong with her car. After checking for a long time, Sherman Wan really couldn't tell. Just as she was about to call for a tow truck, a voice came from behind her. "Miss, the car is broken. Do you want me to take a look at it for you?" Sherman Wan was startled by the sudden sound. She turned around and saw a few young men in their early 20s surrounding her at some point in time. The one who spoke was a man in the lead. He was wearing a black jacket. He also seemed to think that he was handsome and shook his head. "Miss, come, let us examine you." Sherman Wan swallowed her saliva. The situation in front of her didn't seem to be very good. "No need. I've already called for a tow truck." She held her phone and wanted to call the police without leaving a trace. However, the man in the lead took her phone away at this moment. "Miss, don't be so ungrateful. No matter what, we brothers have good intentions." As he spoke, he waved his hand behind him. "Come, you guys give this beautiful lady a good examination." Under the night sky, Sherman Wan's face was pale. She forced herself to calm down and reached out her hand to the man. "Give me back my phone. I don't need you to examine me." "Miss, maybe you'll need it later?" The man in the black jacket smiled evilly. The few people he brought with him had already approached Sherman Wan. Sherman Wan was really scared this time. She was only one person, but the other party had 6. She pressed her body tightly against the front cover of the car, still thinking about how to escape. Suddenly, the sound of a car came from behind her. She turned her face, and the lights from the car shone on her face, causing her to narrow her eyes for a moment. The men in the black jacket weren't in a hurry to move. They thought that they would continue after the other party left. Unexpectedly, the car stopped beside them. It was also at this moment that the man in the black jacket saw it clearly. The other party wasn't a car. It was 5 cars. There were 2 Bentleys in front and 2 Bentleys in the back. The one in the middle was a Rolls-Royce Phantom. Even people without common sense were stunned when they saw this row of luxury cars. Not to mention hooligans like the yellow-haired man. Sherman Wan also saw it clearly now. She saw many tall men in black suits getting out of the cars in front and behind her. Someone opened the back door of the Rolls-Royce, and a pair of extremely slender and powerful legs came out first. In the light of the car lights, the owner of the legs walked towards Sherman Wan step by step. Sherman Wan swallowed her saliva. Before she could react, the owner of the legs had already walked in front of her. The few young men were so scared that they didn't dare to speak. Jean Hauser looked at Sherman Wan and reached out his hand to her. Sherman Wan didn't know what to think of, but she actually dodged and pulled her hand back. Not only that, she even took a step to the side. She forgot that there was someone beside her. As she stood there, she bumped into a hooligan standing beside her. This time, Shi Mengwan didn't have time to dodge. Her body moved to the side, but she lost her balance and fell to the side. Zhang Hao's hand caught her waist in time. In the next second, she was carried horizontally. Pressing her head into his chest, Zhang Hao gave the leader of the men in black a look. The man understood. The man in the black jacket realized that something was wrong, but it was too late to escape. Soon, waves of wailing and fighting sounds came from behind Zhang Hao and the others. Shi Mengwan wanted to poke her head out to take a look, but she was already carried into the car by Zhang Hao. Shi Mengwan and Zhang Hao hadn't seen each other for almost 2 months. Sitting in the car, she didn't have time to look outside. She just looked at Zhang Hao and sensitively realized that Zhang Hao in front of her seemed to be different. Chapter 696. The car was very spacious and very quiet. Shi Mengwan took some time to recover from the frightening moment just now. She almost thought that she was going to, retracting her thoughts, she looked at Zhang Hao in front of her with complicated emotions. From when she was a young girl until now, every time she was in danger, he was the one who saved her. She couldn't say what she felt in her heart, but at this moment, her mood was very subtle. She couldn't think about anything else, so she just stared blankly at Zhang Hao. Only then did she realize that the person in front of her seemed to be different. After not seeing him for nearly 2 months, Zhang Hao's brows were still the same, but the expression revealed inside was very different. In the past, he was a little dark and arrogant. Looking at him now, his dark and arrogant demeanor was still there. But there was something else. The moment he got out of the car, just now, his eyes were cold and his gaze was like a knife. It gave people the feeling that he was a sword that had finally been sharpened. This kind of superior aura made Shi Mengwan subconsciously swallow her saliva. The car was still parked. Shi Mengwan turned around and saw that the man in black who was in the lead outside the car window had already been beaten to the ground. The scene was a little bloody. Shi Mengwan turned around to look at Zhang Hao. Is that enough? If they continue to fight, someone would probably die. Zhang Hao glanced at her and didn't answer. She came out to talk about the factory today. She was wearing a casual suit, and her long hair was tied into a ponytail. She looked much more beautiful and youthful. He picked up the ponytail behind her head and leaned over to sniff it gently. This action didn't contain much of an erotic feeling, but Shi Mengwan felt an inexplicable ambiguity, which made her very uncomfortable. It's really enough. She forced herself to focus on something else. Tell them to stop. Zhang Hao still had her hair in his hand. He moved his face closer. Do you know what they wanted to do just now? Shi Mengwan's breathing tightened. Of course she knew. Just call the police. Zhang Hao stared at her face for a long time and knocked on the car window. The people outside almost instantly stopped kicking and hitting. The group of people stood beside the car in front and back. Shi Mengwan couldn't help but turn around to look at Zhang Hao. This person had caused such a big scene. He was probably different now, wasn't he? She didn't have the chance to ask the question in her heart. Those people had already gotten into the car, and the car started up again. She couldn't help but turn to look at him. The person in front of her still had the same face, but she felt a little unfamiliar. Zhang Hao watched as her mind wandered. His lips moved forward, and he was about to kiss her lips. Shi Mengwan subconsciously avoided it. Such an action made Zhang Hao's eyes darken. He put his arm around her waist and grabbed her, not letting her leave. He lowered his head and kissed her without warning. Shi Mengwan didn't have time to escape. This time, Zhang Hao kissed her. The lights in the carriage were dim. Occasionally, there was the reflection of the street lamp. His deep facial features could not be seen clearly at this moment. Oh, Shi Mengwan felt pain on her lips. He bit her. She stared at him. He stepped back, but his hand was still on her waist. The distance between the two faces was less than 3 centimeters. The atmosphere in front of him was too intimate. Shi Mengwan wasn't used to it. At this moment, he was at a loss for words. My car, it wasn't just a car. There was also her bag in the car. Don't worry, they will take care of it. His breath brushed against her face. Shi Mingwan was about to step back, but for some reason, she closed her eyes. This way, it seemed like she was inviting Zhang Haoze to kiss her. Zhang Haoze did as she wished and kissed her once again. Shi Mingwan looked at the 5 cars parked in front of her apartment and felt a headache coming on. She didn't understand why things had become like this again. She looked at Zhang Haoze speechlessly. Can you not be so ostentatious? She still had to live in this neighborhood in the future. If others saw Zhang Haoze's actions, what would they think? Zhang Haoze shook his head. The current situation was special. Although he made a deal with Uncle Qi and took over the Zhang family. But the Zhang family wasn't peaceful either. The current Zhang family was like a volcano under a calm surface that could erupt at any time. Whether it was Zhang Yi, Zhang Li, or Zhang Yang, none of them were convinced of him. In the past month or so, they had been playing tricks behind his back. Zhang Haoze didn't take them seriously, but he wouldn't relax with the necessary defensive measures. Why are you still looking for me? Shi Mingwan was angry. I remember that we broke up. I also remember that I didn't agree. He wanted to get out of the car, but Shi Mingwan sat there and refused to get out. Zhang Haoze. Shi Mingwan felt tired every time she communicated with him. What do you take me for? What do you take me for? You appear whenever you want and disappear whenever you want. When you disappeared, there was no news at all. When you appeared, you insisted on me cooperating with your performance. What kind of logic is this? Her face was expressionless. The emotions that had arisen when she saw him had all turned into calmness. Zhang Haoze looked at her and suddenly reached out to hug her. I'm sorry. Shi Mingwan's body stiffened, but Zhang Haoze acted as if he didn't feel it. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have disappeared and appeared whenever I wanted. But if you're unhappy, I can promise you that I won't do this in the future. Shi Mingwan didn't know how to react to this sudden apology. But she quickly remembered that this was the second time Zhang Haoze had apologized. Last time, he also said he was sorry, but what happened in the end? It wasn't that Shi Mingwan didn't love him, but she didn't want to believe him anymore. The price of believing him was too high. She realized that she couldn't afford it. Zhang Haoze, she should be happy that such a person made such a promise at such a time, but she really couldn't be happy. Do you know? She looked at her fingertips and lowered her eyes. Her expression couldn't be seen clearly. I don't dare to believe your promise anymore. You might not know, but I'm very tired when I'm with you. I often wonder if I did something wrong. I often wonder what you're doing in places that I don't know about. Will those things be dangerous? Zhang Haoze. Shi Mingwan finally looked up at him and met his eyes. It's too tiring to be with you. I don't want to be tired anymore. As she spoke, she pushed open the car door and got out. She turned around and went into the apartment. Zhang Haoze got out of the car and waved his hand. Although the leader didn't agree, the 5 cars drove away together. Zhang Haoze slowed down and followed behind Shi Mingwan. Shi Mingwan quickened her pace, and Zhang Haoze followed behind her. When they reached the elevator, she wanted to tell him to stop following her, but this wasn't her home, so she endured it. Zhang Haoze didn't seem to notice the disgust in her eyes at all, and just followed behind her. They entered the elevator and went upstairs. Shi Mingwan was silent all the way, so he followed her all the way. It wasn't until they stood at the door that Shi Mingwan finally couldn't help but turn around and glare at him. Mr. Zhang, don't you have anywhere to go? Shi Mingwan's tone wasn't very good. I believe that with your current status, you should have your own place in Lin City, right? Even if you don't, I believe that Miss Chun would be happy to take you in, so I really don't understand why you keep following me. Zhang Haoze looked at the anger on her face. This was her, right? She was lively and full of life. There was an almost imperceptible smile in his eyes. He leaned forward and placed one hand on the door behind her. I do have a place to stay. His face was almost pressed against her face, and his voice was low and seductive. But I just want to be by your side. This person's words of love were really deadly. Shi Mingwan's body was already tightly pressed against the door behind her. A man's lust would lead people astray. This was really true. The Zhang Haoze in front of her could be considered a male version of Daji to her. Shi Mingwan never thought that she would hear Zhang Haoze confess like this one day. Looking at his face, she was a little confused. You, before she could finish the word you The door behind her opened with a caw. Shi Mingwan was stunned when she almost fell back. She had just steadied herself when she remembered that her bag was still in the car, so she didn't bring the key. Then, she lowered her head and saw Jean Hauser open the door with the key. Her lips opened and closed again. Ew, didn't she ask him to return the key to her? Why did he still have it? When Jean Hauser opened the door, he used his other hand to hold her waist. He brought her in and closed the door. Jean Hauser, Shi Mingwan reached out her hand. Return the key. Wan. Jean Hauser picked her up and held her body firmly in his arms. I miss you so much. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead. Don't you miss me? Who wants to miss you? Shi Mingwan went to pull his hand. Jean Hauser restrained her hand behind her back. You, don't you miss me? I don't want to. Jean Hauser kissed her on the lips. Do you want to? Who would miss you? Get out of the way. Jean Hauser remembered again. Do you want to? I said, I don't want to, I don't want to, I don't want to. Jean Hauser, stop fooling around. I really don't miss you. Her voice rose a notch, and her face was flushed with anger. Jean Hauser narrowed his eyes slightly and suddenly carried her horizontally. Since you say you don't want to, then it proves that I've done too little before. It looks like I have to do something to make you remember it often. Jean Hauser, you're shameless. Jean Hauser wasn't angry when he heard this. Instead, he leaned his face close to her ear. Yes, I'll do something even more shameless later. Do you believe me? In terms of being a hooligan, how could Shi Mingwan be his match? Her body was placed on the bed. When she tried to get up, he piled on top of her and pressed her down. If she pushed him, he would have the ability to make her unable to move. The moment her hand was tied by his tie, Shi Mingwan gritted her teeth. You're raping me. Is that so? Jean Hauser narrowed his eyes. Since you said that, I can only think of a way to make you willingly be raped by me. Shi Mingwan didn't understand what Jean Hauser meant. However, when she was teased by him like a kitten and begged for mercy time and time again, she realized that this was really more shameful than being willing to do it. When Shi Mingwan was half awake and half dreaming, she felt herself being gently carried into the bathroom by Jean Hauser. There was no bathtub, so she was carried by him the entire time. After he was done, he carefully dried her dry and carried her out again. He gently placed her on the bed. He took the hairdryer to dry her hair, then pulled up the blanket to cover her body. Shi Mingwan was about to fall asleep, so her body was very tired and sore. So much so that when she saw Jean Hauser like this, not only did she not feel touched, but she felt angry instead. Bastard. She was angry. Jean Hauser, can you not be like a stallion in heat every time? Jean Hauser frowned because of her description. As if he had thought of something, he wrapped her hand in his arms. Sorry, I can't help it. He gently kissed her earlobe and felt her trembling slightly because of his action. He silently curled his lips, and his eyes were filled with joy. My self-control is very poor after meeting you. It was clearly his problem, so why was he blaming her now? Shi Mingwan didn't want to talk to him, and she was very sleepy. She pretended not to hear what Jean Hauser said. She closed her eyes and wanted to sleep, but Jean Hauser didn't allow it. He kissed her on the cheek again. Wan, come with me to Qing City. Shi Mingwan didn't even bother to answer. She didn't want to talk to him at all. I want you to stay by my side. Most importantly, other than those restless cousins, there was also Uncle Chi. He didn't trust anyone. He had to keep her under his nose. Only when he personally watched her and protected her would he be at ease. No, Shi Mingwan refused and turned her back to him. Jean Hauser, I'm not going anywhere. She used her posture to show her resistance. Jean Hauser looked at the back of her head and hooked her into his arms with his big hand. He lowered his head and gently kissed the top of her head. Sleep. If there was anything, he would talk about it after she woke up. Yesterday, Shi Mingwan would rather believe that she was dreaming. In her dream, Jean Hauser saved her, and in her dream, Jean Hauser followed her home. Then, the two of them messed around again. She shook her head. This kind of dream wasn't good. It was a nightmare for her. But she didn't expect that when she opened her eyes, Jean Hauser was still there. Just like before, the dining table was filled with breakfast. Jean Hausa sat at the dining table. When he saw her get up, he reached out his hand to her. After yesterday, Shi Mengwan didn't want to argue with Jean Hausa over such a small matter. If there was anything, she could wait until she finished her breakfast, and then she could slowly talk to him. I'm going out later. After breakfast, without waiting for Shi Mengwan to lay her cards on the table, Jean Hausa took the initiative to explain his whereabouts. There are some things at the company that I need to deal with. I'll probably be in Lin City for the next few days. You can also pack your luggage and come with me to Qing City when you're ready. When Shi Mengwan heard this, she put down the milk in her hand. Jean Hausa, I don't think I promised you that I would go to Qing City, right? Wan, stop fooling around. Jean Hausa wanted to hold her hand, but Shi Mengwan didn't give him the chance. She stood up. Jean Hausa, didn't you come all the way here just to do what happened last night? You've done it now, and your goal has been achieved. You can leave now. Wan, as for me, I'll never go to Qing City. Give up on that thought. After saying this, she turned around and went back to her room to change her clothes and prepare for work. After taking a few steps, she could feel a certain feeling coming from a certain part of her body. She gritted her teeth and turned around to glare at Jean Hausa. Would she accompany such a person to Qing City? She wouldn't serve him anymore. He would go wherever he wanted to go. Jean Hausa sat there without moving. Looking at her figure, the corners of his lips curled up even higher. Jean Hausa looked at Chun Yongchang in front of him expressionlessly. Chun Yongchang, who was used to liking him in front of him, was completely silent at this moment. There was a hint of flattery in the silence. After a long silence, it was Chun Yongchang who spoke first. Hausa, you haven't been paying much attention to the company these few months. Jean Hausa was silent. He wanted to send Shi Mengwan to the studio in the morning, but he didn't expect to receive a call from Chun Yongchang. He didn't know how he found out about his return to Lin City, so he came looking for him early in the morning. Jean Hausa didn't intend to be too ruthless towards Chun Yongchang. However, this didn't mean that he was a soft persimmon that could be bullied by anyone. Don't you have uncle to deal with the company's matters? I thought you wouldn't want to see me interfere too much. Look at what you're saying. No matter what, you and Fei Fei are childhood sweethearts and engaged fiancés. Isn't it normal for you to interfere in the Chun family's business? Uncle, it's better to be careful with your words. I remember that I've already made it clear to Fei Fei that we've already broken off the engagement. Uncle, if you continue to say that, it will affect Fei Fei's reputation outside. Chun Yongchang looked at Jean Hausa. Even he couldn't help but want to curse. If you really knew that it would affect Fei Fei's reputation, you shouldn't have canceled the engagement. Hausa, look at what you're saying. Fei Fei is sincere to you. You can't let her down like this, can you? Chun Yongchang endured his unhappiness and once again played the emotional card. He said how they saved Jean Hausa back then. If it weren't for them, Jean Hausa would have died on the streets by now. If Jean Hausa was a person with a conscience, he wouldn't have declined and taken over the Chun Corporation's business. In the past 2 months, Chun Yongchang really felt uncomfortable. When Jean Hausa was in Lin City, he didn't do anything. However, the company's performance had been thriving. Many cases that seemed difficult to solve at that time became easy in Jean Hausa's hands. Ever since he wasn't around for the past 2 months, although the Chun Corporation didn't have any major problems, Chun Yongchang found it more and more difficult. He also understood more and more about Jean Hausa's role and methods. Jean Hausa sat still and patiently waited for Chun Yongchang to finish talking about the past. He supported his chin with one hand. Then, Uncle Chun, what do you want me to do? He didn't call him uncle anymore. Instead, he added his surname. The alienation was already very obvious. Chun Yongchang didn't hear it. Look at what you're saying. Of course, you're going to re-enter the Chun Corporation and take over your original business. Jean Hausa wasn't in a hurry to speak. He just looked at Chun Yongchang and stared straight at his face. He couldn't take it anymore. What did he mean? He finally spoke. Go to the Chun Corporation and take over the Chun Corporation's business. Then, wait for me to make the Chun Corporation bigger and stronger, and then let the real ideal person in your heart take over your business, right? Hausa, what nonsense are you talking about? Is it nonsense? Jean Hausa didn't think so. He stared at Chun Yongchang's face, took out a photo from the drawer, and pushed the photo in front of Chun Yongchang. Seeing the photo, Chun Yongchang's eyes widened. Where did you get this photo? No, how did you know? He did this very secretly, and no one knew about it. Other than a trusted aide who had followed him for many years and took care of him from time to time, no one else knew about this matter, let alone others. Zhang Haoze looked at Chun Yongchang with a hint of mockery in his eyes. Uncle probably doesn't know, but I don't like to fight battles that I'm not confident in. Since you want me to return to the Chun Corporation, support the Chun Corporation again, and bring it to glory, then I have to make sure what benefits I can get from this place. Right? If there's no benefit, why waste my time? But I didn't expect that the matter that Uncle arranged for me not only didn't have any benefits, but also dug such a big pit for me to jump into. He didn't say anything else. Chun Yongchang became anxious. Zhang Haoze, what do you mean? You uncle. Zhang Haoze picked up the photo with an appreciative look in his eyes. When he put it down, his gaze became quite sharp. Making wedding dresses for others is not a good thing. Maybe there are saints who like it, but I don't. Haoze, and not to mention, I've already told Fei Fei that we're going to cancel the wedding. Fei Fei is a very smart girl. She just didn't understand it for a while. After a long time, she will know that her feelings are just the infatuation of a little girl who doesn't understand love. But, Uncle, you're different. Zhang Haoze's voice was filled with mockery, and every word seemed to hit Chun Yongchang's heart. Uncle, you've doted on Fei Fei for so many years. You made Fei Fei think that she was the happiest little princess in the world. But I think she probably never dreamed that she, the Chun family's proudest little princess, wasn't the only one. Because her father, who has always doted on her, had an illegitimate child outside. Zhang Haoze. Chun Yongchang couldn't take it anymore. That's enough. Shut up. Don't say any more. Fei Fei's health isn't good. You don't want her to be agitated. However, you don't want these assets to fall into the hands of others, so you came to me. Because with me, who owes the Chun family a favor, you can ignore me and treat me as a sacrifice. You can use me to make money for you. You can use me to bring the Chun family to the top again. And once the Chun family reaches the height you want again, you will think of him as a gift to that bastard of yours who is out there. And poor Fei Fei, she was sacrificed by you just like that. Zhang Haoze's words were very soft. Chun Yongchang's expression was ugly. He wanted to slap the table and scold Zhang Haoze for talking nonsense. But at this moment, the office door was opened with a bang. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.